The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6, and my goodness me, it is a glorious morning. It's going to be the hottest day of the year so far, apparently. It is the first day of spring, apparently. March the 20th, the spring equinox. The sky here in London at the world headquarters of Common Sense is absolutely stunning. I'll put a picture out on X if you haven't seen it yet, and you will see it later on because we'll put it up on our screens here. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Rafe Heidelmann-Koo is here as well. We're going to be going through the stories of the papers this morning. Lots going on. There's a big generals meeting, of course, coming up later on today in London, where the military might of Western Europe and maybe other parts of the world as well are going to get together to figure out what to do about Vladimir Putin, who seems to be running rings around everybody at the moment, as you might expect from somebody who used to run the KGB. We'll find out what is going on with all of that. We'll also talk you through some of the stories in the front pages this morning, and there's a great variety of them, to be honest. A lot of them have to do with gender. Biological sex erased from official data. This is a piece in the front of the Daily Mail, where government-commissioned reports have found that biological sex have been erased from official data in the police, the NHS and even the military. So what that basically means is that when they're collecting data on, for example, how many babies have died in maternity units or how many women are coming in with breast cancer, you don't know they're women, you don't know they're babies, you don't know whether they're male, female, other, non-binary, intersex, whatever it is. Unbelievable, absolutely ridiculous. The other one on the front page of the Daily Telegraph says basically that criminals are now going to be able to pick their gender. They can do whatever they want. They don't have to be men, they don't have to be women, they don't have to be non-binary, they don't have to be llamas. Just pick whatever you want. Labour apparently will not force the police to record biological sex, despite a report which says that that's exactly what they should do. Strangest story of the day, perhaps, is on the front page of The Sun, and it's a story about an ex-casualty star who managed to crash her car while high on cocaine at 10 o'clock in the morning. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. And also the biggest story of the day, I think, rush to net zero will lead to a crash. This is also in The Sun, exclusive by Harry Cole. Britain's headlong rush to net zero risks triggering a financial meltdown, according to bombshell government papers leaked to the Sun newspaper. This is a report that's been cooked up in Whitehall, basically. It says the UK's national debt would rocket as its anemic economy would be shunned by investors and the poorest in society would carry the burden. This report says basically the poor planning for going carbon neutral by 2050 comes with the potential risk of destabilising the entire financial system. Congratulations, guys. Well done indeed. I mean, unbelievable stuff, right? We'll be talking about that. Plus, of course, robots in kebab shops. We're going to be talking about 3 people who died from food poisoning after eating in an NHS hospital. And the verdict's in on that new Snow White film, and it doesn't look very good. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. It's the first day of spring. Get out of bed. Get up. This is it.
The return of the sausages.
Yes. We must release the sausages for the barbecue later on, so we're getting a word from the Prime Minister on that one coming up. Front page of the Times has got Trump eyes takeover of Ukraine's atomic sites. The White House has moved beyond the minerals deal. We'll see how that goes. But Rafe is here. Rafe, very good morning to you. Good to see you. Where should we start? Should we start with net zero? Because I think that is the biggest story this morning. Front page of the Sun, basically a warning, a dire warning, which of course we could have given them some months ago without having to do a report inside of the civil service. Hundreds of billions of pounds worth of assets around the world being retired up to 30 years before the end of their shelf life could cause market meltdown due to sudden drops in the value of firms, including those from Britain and overseas companies who invest here. It's a massive financial risk.
Yeah, and it's what we all knew. I mean, this leaked document that Harry's wonderfully uncovered here estimates that by 2030, up to 10% of GDP will have been subtracted from consumption. I mean, you know, we're in a time of, you know, trying to increase our GDP, trying to increase growth, and at the same time, we're tying one hand behind our backs.
Right.
And yet, as much as, you know, this is really shocking stuff, although it really shouldn't be shocking, and yet you still see government ministers, even in response to this, repeating that same old mantra that this is the way for the economy to surge ahead with green net zero. It's just the same as them coming out with diversity as our greatest strength after yet another terrorist bombing. They're tied to these mantras, and when all the evidence presented before them, they still refuse to see it. The emperor has new clothes, and I'm glad that the Sun is actually exposing this.
Well, it is extraordinary, isn't it? Because we've been saying for years and years and years, you know, the best way to heat your house, for example, is with a gas boiler. It's very efficient. The best car to drive around in, probably one of the cleanest things you can get, is a diesel car now, because they're so well put together. You know, they use all sorts of other, you know, cleansing agents to get the diesel better. You know, electric cars are not the answer, never have been. And of course now all the wokeists and all the people that hate Elon Musk have completely turned turtle on electric cars and setting fire to them, keying them, you know, firebombing them. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, isn't it?
And let alone the carbon footprint from each firebomb attack.
Yes.
Have they ever considered how much carbon's being released?
Yes, absolutely right.
At least people who've got those Teslas will be very happy that they are bulletproof. I suppose that's what they're now finally testing out, the resilience. But this is the thing, I mean, Democrats and supporters of the Democrats firing bullets into Tesla dealerships. And you're kind of going, what is going on out there? How mad are these people? But the real thing here, of course, is that the burden of all of this is going to fall upon those who can least afford it.
Yes.
It's the low-income households who are going to be paying the most for this.
Yeah.
And they're being told, you know, they don't have a great lifestyle as it is, and they're being told they have to change their lifestyle anyway in order to meet up with this. It's fine if you are Camilla living in Belgravia to do all of this.
Yeah, so I bought myself an electric motorcycle.
Yeah, the average British person cannot deal with this, and they're just going to end up having a more and more miserable existence.
And these are also the people paying the ULEZ fines and paying all of the congestion charging because they have to go into work. They might have a van that they drive to work. They have to pay ridiculous amounts of money in tax to continue to use that van. I mean, I was again talking to the people that drive, the great people that drive us into work in the mornings. You know, they're all working for a living. They're all many of them working all through the night, and they're saying, you know, what are they doing to London? Why are they ruining London? Why are they deliberately making it so difficult for people to work in London?
Well, it's no surprise that, as we heard at the top of the hour, Britain has now fallen 4 places amongst the happiest nations in the world. Well,
no surprise
when you
there.
See stuff like this, no surprise at all.
Absolutely. Just one thing that will please some people, it certainly made me smile this morning. Apparently a jury in North Dakota has decided that Greenpeace are going to have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to a pipeline firm over a defamation case and protests that took place nearly a decade ago. They basically, this company called Energy Transfer Partners, based in Dallas, oil and gas company, worth almost 70 billion, sued Greenpeace for $300 million for defamation and orchestrating criminal behaviour by protesters back in 2016, 2017. And they've won their case. So let's face it, this could be the end of Greenpeace, which would be certainly a reason for me to throw a party.
Well, it would give us all a bit of peace, wouldn't it? the end of Greenpeace, absolutely.
I wonder if Just Stop Oil will take note of this and go, you know, listen, if you want to have your lives ruined, you little rich kids, you know, we'll come after you, we'll come after your house, we'll come after your parents' house and your electric car, and we'll take it all off you if you don't stop demonstrating.
Exactly, and of course the problem is the Americans always end up giving these great whopping penalties to people who lose cases, huge damages. We don't get anything near that in this country, which is why, of course, the Americans are so effective at actually punishing wrongdoers, and I wish we had a bit of that over here. Very amused to see that this took place in North Dakota, which is very much a gas and energy friendly state, so I think the Greenpeace knew that its card was blotted. But yes, they have to know, you know, of course you have the right to protest, but of course the right to protest doesn't mean to the point where you destroy and disrupt decent companies that are doing their stuff, decent people's lives, stopping us getting to work on the trains or whatever it is. You know, there must be some responsibility here if you're going to cause disruption.
Absolutely right, and of course Greenpeace is saying that these lawsuits are aimed at destroying the right to peaceful protest. Everybody knows that Greenpeace don't take part in peaceful protests. They do a lot more than that, you know, and they cover this sort of umbrella of, you know, we're not really doing any harm. Well, you're doing a great deal of harm. You're ruining people's ability to work, as you say. You're ruining people's livelihoods. You're protesting in a way which is stopping business from being carried out. And so, you know, the idea that they're now saying, oh, this case could have a wider chilling effect on free speech. Well, maybe you shouldn't abuse free speech then.
Yes, it's the Jerry Adams defence.
Yeah, right.
I'm tangentially involved to these acts, but I've got no direct involvement.
Yes, absolutely right. We're seeing up on the screen there the front page of The Sun, which is a particularly unusual story. Basically, a woman called Amanda Mealing, 57 years old, lost control of her Mini Cooper at 10:14 a.m. in the morning, that was. Hit a Skoda driven by a nurse called Mark Lesage. He had to quit his job because he was so badly injured. She admitted driving under the influence of cocaine at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, well,
she's creating her own casualty episode.
I was going to say, she's taken method acting to a whole new level, you know. Robert De Niro will be proud of her
Absolutely.
for taking... but yes, I mean, look, she says in mitigation, her best friend died, her dad died, her dog died, but, you know, everyone has things happening to them.
Well, maybe she'd have gone easy on the marching powder.
And so, yeah, I mean, indefensible. And, of course, this poor man who's a nurse, part of our NHS, he said, had I been in a smaller car, I probably wouldn't have lived. It was only because his car was bigger than hers that he managed to survive this.
Yeah. She drifted across the road as she was driving down it, and the scenes of carnage at the actual scene of the accident are dreadful. She cut her head, fractured her wrist and broke her clavicle. She also then tested positive at the roadside for cocaine use. And Mealing basically said that she had been at a pal's the night before the crash. I mean, it just does tell you that, you know, you don't get involved in that stuff, and you certainly shouldn't drive as a result of doing it. Very, very stupid woman indeed. Let's have a quick look at something that I came across yesterday, and we know, for example, I just discovered today that Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, is currently in Washington having talks with the commercial department of the White House about tariffs and all the rest of it. But Angela Raina, in the midst of all of this madness that's been going on in the last couple of weeks, sneaked off to Ethiopia. I don't know if you knew this, and we've got a little video that she made while she was there.
It's been an incredible experience coming to Ethiopia to see the work that the UK is doing here, whether that's the humanitarian work, but also the collaboration on growth and opportunities for trade. The UK is committed to working with Ethiopia in conflict resolution and humanitarian need. I visited some of the work that we're doing, the outreach for education and healthcare, but also the work that we've been doing in helping businesses grow and the UK economy to work with the Ethiopian economy.
So they're helping businesses grow in Ethiopia while they're closing them down in Britain. Brilliant. I mean, how's that going to work out in the long run? And she went on this trip, right, without really announcing it. There was no reason for it. Normally, when ministers go on these trips, they're announcing some kind of policy.
Precisely.
There was no policy announcement. The trip cost about £20,000, apparently. And the video that was put on YouTube a couple of days ago, garnered something like 50 views.
Yeah, I mean, quite clearly the weather's been terrible here, so she's gone off somewhere nice and hot for a change. I mean, Ethiopia, I presume, is not on our top 50 list of free trade countries that we're trying to do a deal with.
No.
And yes, you're absolutely right. Every time they go on one of these jollies normally, they have that sort of, you know, summary of the deals that have been signed where British business will be able to invest. And there was none of this here. She could have done all of this via Zoom.
Yeah.
She could have just had a look around everything in a virtual reality headset, and there was no need for her to leave London at all.
It is quite
It just seems to be completely done for virtue signalling purposes.
Yeah.
Nothing more. And you have to wonder, is this in response to the Americans cutting US aid? Are they trying to show, oh, look, well, British aid's going into Ethiopia still. Aren't we the good guys?
We can help you with some free money. But as I say, it's rather ironic, given that the business is growing in Ethiopia, but it's shrinking in this country, thanks to the policies of this Labour government. Speaking of, just going back to the story about net zero, GB Energy is back in the news, because GB Energy, as we quite often say, is a ridiculous organisation run by one guy, Jürgen Meyer, who used to run Siemens, who doesn't appear to have any kind of attachment to an office. He
follows me on Twitter, so he's got one good thing in his...
Well, I suppose that gives him something to do, because so far we can't determine what he does all day. He made a video the other day, which was all about how wedded they were to having an office in Aberdeen, but he filmed it from an office in London, so I don't think he's actually been to Aberdeen. It now turns out that when they chose their logo, they got that wrong as well. Because they've had to change it, because it turns out that the logo that they picked up, which was the old one there, is one of those sort of pick it off the shelf stock images, and it was being used by a company in America, which is not an energy company. It's being used for something else. It's supposed to show a light bulb of some kind.
That's what that is. I was wondering.
You would be forgiven for not knowing what the hell it was. But anyway, it was pointed out to them that actually this is the wrong. I think it was a Sunday Times journalist, Gabriel Pogren, who actually spotted it and said, you know, that logo is a stock image and you can't really use it. So they've had to change it already before they've hired any people to work there, before they've found an office, before they've found a website. It's just a shambles.
It doesn't instill you with much confidence. An organisation set up to try to solve Britain's great energy issues, potentially in charge of billions of pounds at some point, can't actually go through the most basic branding exercise. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Some guy obviously just went on Google and went, oh, that's quite a nice image. Why don't we nick that? I mean, incredible. I mean, if it was Jürgen's choice, I don't know. 17 minutes past 6. We've got plenty to do. Don't forget, this is how you get in touch with us. 0344 499 1000. We'll take your voice notes. We'll take your thoughts on all manner of things. Coming up, we'll talk a bit more about this gender madness, which is in the papers this morning. Criminals free to pick their own gender. And basically, biological data that is being collected is not being collected on the basis of anybody's sex. So what's the point of collecting data if you don't know whose data you're collecting? Women's rights campaigners basically have said the government needs to sort this one out, because the NHS, the police and even the military, basically, thanks to activism in the sort of trans area, are collecting data on people in this country without saying what gender people are and what sex they are. Seems absolutely insane. 17 minutes past 6, back after this.
I think you have to, again, put things in a longer term. Putin started this war There's no doubt about that. We all watched that. I was in London at the time, and we all watched together in horror as leader after leader essentially begged Putin not to move ahead with this. And of course he did, expecting that he would have a quick win. Well, that win has cost his country tremendously, economically, in terms of its standing, the number of deaths. They've had North Korean soldiers fighting for them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 21 minutes past 6. Apparently it's the first day of spring. The spring equinox is upon us, Thursday, the 20th of March. So things are going to get warmer, things are going to get better. Are they? No. I'm saying release the sausages because it's time for your barbecue to be The
return of the sausages.
There we go, the return of the sausages. Release them, get them out there, get your shorts on because it's going to be a lovely day today. 21 degrees apparently in some parts of the world. I've got a voice note from Jay.
Morning guys, fantastic show as always. This is a new low this morning. Starmer raising taxes on terminally ill children in hospices. This is disgusting. What is this man doing? Get him out of office now.
It's a very good point. One of the things that was raised yesterday at Prime Minister's Questions was this very subject where Kemi Badenoch actually asked him about hospices. Have a look.
He keeps talking about budget benefits. Unemployment is not a benefit. Businesses closing are not benefits. I asked him whether he would exempt hospices, even children's hospices, from the jobs tax. He did not answer that question. His MPs know that this could affect end-of-life care. So I will ask the same question again. Will he exempt hospices from paying his jobs tax?
Speaker, we've already invested £100 million for adult and children's hospices, an additional £26 million in funding through the Children's Hospices grant, but we can't get away with what we were doing in that budget, the root cause, which was fixing the economy they left so badly damaged, a £22 billion black hole. Perhaps you start the next question with an apology.
They want me to answer questions, then we can swap sides.
She says that she wants to swap sides. I mean, heaven forbid.
The trouble with Starmer, right, is that he thinks it's all a game when he appears in question time like that, Prime Minister's Questions. Well, there's an awful lot of people, as we heard from Jay there, are pretty angry about what's happening to this country and what he is doing to it and how he is ruining it, along with his rather, ghastly collection of nasty people in the cabinet.
But nasty is the word for it. You remember when Theresa May said that the Tory party was being seen as the nasty party. I think we can now put that placard firmly in Labour's benches. I mean, just from the PR stand alone, taxing hospices, end-of-life care, children who are dying. I mean, this just obviously plays so badly with Labour's core voters, after all, who are supposed to be people who wear their heart on their sleeves. And not being able to actually confirm there that they won't be applying this to hospices, I think, speaks volumes there about the man's lack of political acumen. Yeah, lack of acumen, and also lack of just general kind of heart. Pathos. Yeah. You know, where's his pathos? How can you even talk about taxing sick and dying people? It's just incredible. Meanwhile, Labour faces council exodus over benefits because an awful lot of councillors, as we come up to the council elections in May, a month and a bit to go until then, hundreds of them are apparently leaving the Labour Party and joining up with the Green Party, running as independents. So, I mean, I think they're going to take a massive shellacking, as we used to say, in those elections, aren't they? Well, and performances, as we just saw in PMQs, is not going to help keep them on side with Labour either, because it's things like that that are turning off so many dyed-in-the-wool Labour supporters. including these guys, and they want to cause maximum damage. So they're actually talking about resigning from the Labour Party the day after they actually win in the May elections for a lot of them as well. Curiously, none of them seem to be going over to Reform. No. But Green Party and Independents. Also, curiously, very few seem to want to go over to the Lib Dems. But yes, remember, you know, that great stonking majority that the Labour Party got was only secured with 33% of the electoral votes. They were hanging by a thread in so many marginal constituencies.
Yeah, it's described as a very thin majority, even though it's a big number. It's not very resilient, it would seem. And I think the problem is that an awful lot of people, and you see it all the time now on social media, a lot of people who would be sort of thought to be traditional lefties are really not happy with Starmer. They think that the guy has betrayed them. They think that he's gone to the right. They think that he's suddenly, slashing and burning. There's a piece in The Guardian today from Rachel Reeves' budget coming up next week, which apparently is going to be the biggest cut to public services since austerity.
Well, they're doing everything, of course, that they said that they opposed when the Tories were in power. Yeah. They're doing exactly the same thing. And, you know, you would, if you're a Labour voter, of course, you could be forgiven for thinking, did we actually elect a left-wing party? Yes. I mean, it does go to show you what a dire state our economy is in, that we're having to go through all of this. Now, the Labour Party says, oh, well, this is not austerity, because actually our cuts are only half of the cuts that the Tories did in 2010. Right. The big difference is in 2010 the Tories had very good working public services. Yes. So those cuts weren't felt that greatly. All of our services have been pared back to the bones now, and so actually these cuts may actually hurt far more.
I don't know how they've managed it. So they've given everybody more money, and yet somehow the services have got worse. I mean, that's quite an interesting conclusion to come to, isn't it?
Well, that's just the story of our civil service, isn't it? A never-ending bucket, a never-filling hole.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's talk about, speaking of civil service, front page of the Daily Mail, biological sex erased from official data. This is thanks to activists within basically various different bodies in and around the civil service, where they've said basically the government collecting data should not collect it on the basis of sex or gender, which makes it meaningless, doesn't it?
Well, you know, it's so frustrating when you see what Trump is doing in America with DEI and trying to reverse the long march through institutions. Yes. To see here this report clearly saying that in the case of many departments, including the NHS, gender identity is prioritised over sex, and it's trans radical activists who've been unduly influencing ministers who, of course, want to virtue signal and don't want to have the wrath of the trans lobby on them. But it's causing huge issues, as you said. You know, it's difficult to research into women's issues. It's difficult to spot trends in rape cases, medical trials, even gender pay gaps. Of course, people are reporting as female when they're actually male, but they're still on the same salary. Well, all this stuff skews how things go. But then even more fundamentally, of course, it goes down to things like sending out requests to come in for your cervical smear, sending out requests for prostate examination. If those letters are being missed, let alone all of those people who have basically changed their gender, been arrested for a crime, and they can't be linked to all the other offences they committed under the previous sex.
Yes. Well, that takes us to the Telegraph version of this story, which says that basically criminals are free to pick their own gender. And this is the same review, basically. This is from a woman called Alice Sullivan, Professor Alice Sullivan from the University College London. Basically says, she gives all sorts of real examples. She says, but sex-specific checks, such as cervical cancer screenings or prostate exams, are being missed, potentially with fatal consequences. It also presents a safeguarding risk to children, because under the current rules, there is no minimum age at which a child's sex and NHS number can be changed. So they're literally collecting data which is worthless.
Yeah,
it seems to me.
And the NHS seem very happy to just issue somebody with a new NHS number whenever they want to. And, of course, this has huge impacts on all of our public services, because you can't actually make any sort of planning along these lines. As you say here also, in prisons, of course, you now have, you're not supposed to be serving in a prison if you are biologically of the different sex. Yeah. Well, we've had cases with Isla Bryson and others where that happened. I think it's hugely dangerous and hugely damaging.
Yeah, absolutely right. Another story on that page in the Mail, page 6 in the Mail, which has really got not much play at all, but it's quite an important story, it seems to me. 3 people died and 2 became unwell following an outbreak of Listeria linked to a chocolate dessert supply to NHS hospitals. I mean, it doesn't give any timings, doesn't give any suggestions of when this happened. And the victims were aged between 68 and 89. Only 1 had Listeria reported as the cause of death. I mean, again, you know, you go into hospital supposedly to get cured. You don't go into hospital to get worse. And these poor people went into hospital and never came out alive.
Yeah, it's a very worrying thing. I'd never heard of Listeria prior to reading this, but it seems to have come from some, you know, these frozen desserts, ice creams, chilled desserts. It is worrying, you know, because as you know, there seem to be so many different things that can get you in hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you don't get poisoned by the food, you know, you'll pick up some kind of ghastly super bug.
But I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more about Listeria and various other things.
I think so. You know? I think so. And also, they've got another story saying that there's a massive shortage of nurses. And this is another thing. I saw a doctor interviewed the other day saying that, you know, one of the reasons why we've got problems and so many problems inside of the NHS is that there's no vacancies. So if you're a doctor, actually a well-qualified doctor who's just coming out of medical school, it's quite difficult to get a job, which seems extraordinary to me. Why would it be like that?
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary, and of course it puts a lie to this idea that we need immigration because of our public services.
We've got plenty of doctors.
Clearly, we've got enough doctors of our own, like this chap who seems very qualified, a young guy wanting to get on with his life.
Yes.
And it's not surprised that you've got a brain drain to places like America and Canada for qualified medical staff, and then you get people coming in, obviously, who oftentimes don't even have the great grasp of the English language, have difficulty to communicate. I've had that with my own GP. You're not quite sure what they're saying to you.
Yeah.
It's a big mess.
That is absolutely hopeless, isn't it? We're going to come back with some talk about Gareth Southgate. He was on the news yesterday talking about, he was making a little lecture about how young men in this country, in particular young men, are suffering. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's get a voice note quickly from James.
Good morning, Mike. I've just heard your interview with Stanley Johnson, another eco-plank. Why I'm getting sick to death with people like him lecturing us while he sits in a big house, probably the heating on all day. If you want to have acorns on toast, mate, you go for it. Leave us alone. Just leave us alone to live our lives. Bugger off. Cheers, Mike. Have a great day, mate.
Well said, James. Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I more or less said that to him yesterday, Stanley Johnson, because without a question, a shadow of a doubt, this guy's been banging on about the eco-plankery for decades. And I mean, he was one of the original sort of Greenpeace mob, wasn't he? And it's completely and utterly bonkers, basically, the whole idea of this net zero. Because every time you ask anyone, well, what will happen when we get to net zero? What will we have achieved? They don't really know. They can't really tell you exactly what will be the extended length of our lives or the extended length of the planet's life. They can't answer that either. And all they can say is that, well, if we don't do it, this will happen, and the seas will rise up and drown us all, or, you know, the temperatures will become so hot that we won't be able to live here. But that's only a model. It's a working model that they've created for themselves to warn us about something that they don't know will happen.
But it sounds biblical, doesn't it?
It does.
See, and that's where we get to. This is a fundamentalist attitude. Stanley Johnson is a fantasist and a fundamentalist.
Yes.
A terrible combination.
Yeah.
And he's had decades to basically indoctrinate himself with all of this. And it does sound like religious preaching now, you know? If you don't do this, you're going to have the 10 plagues will be visited on you and you'll go to hell.
Frogs will fall from the sky, etc., etc., It's 6:32, Rafe Holomank, who is here. We're coming back with Gareth Southgate, who's now turned into some kind of philosopher king. I don't know when that happened. I must have missed him. Must have been off that day. This is talk.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:34. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, of course. Alan says this from Middlesbrough. Morning, Mike. He says, how many elephants in the room did Gareth Southgate dodge in his woke speech on BBC yesterday? Too many bad role models, it says, if fails to mention. Greed and self-serving in politics and football. Too many weak and lazy parents. A state education system that is a joke. Positive discrimination and anti-whiteness being omnipresent. Authorities turning a blind eye to rape gangs. And that is just for starters. Well, absolutely right. I mean, for some reason, Gareth Southgate was given the right to perform the Dimbleby lecture yesterday, which went out on TV. Let's have a quick look at what he had to say.
Young men are suffering. They're feeling isolated. They're grappling with their masculinity and with their broader place in society. As real-world communities and mentorship declines, young men end up withdrawing, reluctant to talk or express their emotions. They spend more time online searching for direction and are falling into unhealthy alternatives like gaming, gambling and pornography.
And basically, everyone in the sort of what you might call the leftosphere, I don't know what they call it, I'm going to start calling it that, the leftosphere, as opposed to the manosphere, which is another word they've invented, are all going, oh, isn't he brilliant? Isn't Gareth Southgate a genius? What amazing thought processes he's got.
I had to check my calendar, it wasn't April the 1st. I mean, the Dimbleby lecture is supposed to be great minds and thinkers telling you their profound thoughts, you know. Sir Roger Scruton, you know, Richard Dawkins, maybe. Not Gareth Southgate, who's basically having the same sort of conversation you'd have down the pub with him. It's all pretty basic and common sense. That's not to detract from a lot of the stuff, you know.
But they've sort of lionised him, right? I think it's a real indicator of what Britain has lost over time. This is a guy who's never won anything, and yet he's been lionised as one of the great coaches of our time, for coming second. You know, I'm sorry, I don't get that.
It's because they think he's a nice chap. You know, that speaks volumes about basically he's the right sort of person. He's got the good personality. He virtue signals. Therefore, he's great.
But he hasn't won anything.
And well, yes, I mean, that's call me old-fashioned. Don't you need to actually win something?
You know, when the greatest of all time. Right. Okay, then. So what? Muhammad Ali, heavyweight champion of the world, you know, Jose Mourinho, fantastic manager, maybe not very nice person, wins lots of things. Nick Faldo, the golfer, thought to be not a very nice guy, wins everything. You know, Tiger Woods, another one, wins everything. You know, people like Gareth Southgate, you know, it really is nice guys finish last. He might be nice, but what use is he?
But isn't that a damning indictment of the reality of modern Britain, that essentially we celebrate mediocrity?
Yeah, I think that's the trouble. Let's talk. Speaking of mediocrity, let's talk about the Education Secretary, who's the subject of a big piece of The Sun today. We'll be talking about it a little bit later on in the show. Leo McKinstry's written a great piece calling her a miserable Marxist. I love that.
Well, she is. I've long said that, you know, forget people like, you know, David Mastermind Lammy, who's just an incompetent numpty.
Yes.
Someone like Bridget Phillipson knows what she's doing, and that's why it's deeply sinister.
Yes.
Because she has an agenda.
Yes.
It's an agenda for radical change, and she actually is a Marxist. And putting her in charge of education, of all things, is going to be absolutely disastrous.
Yes.
Because education is the one thing we can be proud of in this country. You know, the NHS. Everything else has gone to the dogs, all of our public services. But actually, if you look at the core subjects, maths and English, for example, we are world leaders in there. We rank in the top 10, you know. We're doing very, very well. And that's because of a lot of the changes with these academies that have been brought in and the freeing up, and also pushing out quite a lot of nonsensical ideology. And she wants to reverse all of that. You know, this is the
and change the syllabus
change the syllabus. She wants to cut down on GCSEs, saying they're too stressful for people. And she wants to do what the unions want to do, increase diversity, increase the indoctrination of kids into woke ideology, which is damning, because actually, you know, Aristotle said, give me a child of 7, I'll show you the man. It's not, you know, forget universities, you know, they're lost. I always say, if the hair is blue, there's nothing you can do. You need to focus on primary school and secondary school. And we were doing quite a good job, actually, and now it seems as if we're just going to go back to the very worst
and
points of the woke revolution.
Also used the dreaded word decolonisation of the syllabus and the curriculum, right? So
precisely.
she's going to be taking away all of the history lessons that were teaching people about the history of this country.
Except for slavery and empire, which will be taught as being only bad and everything else.
That was, of course, they'll tell us all about how awful Shakespeare was, similar to the Shakespeare Society, that he's obviously a racist, a white supremacist, a man who knew nothing other than to enslave the rest of the world and make them read his books. I mean, it's laughable, isn't it?
In a time before we actually had a single colony.
I know, absolutely right. Let's talk about France, because some interesting stories have come across our table this morning. One actually from Andrew Neil, who tweeted out this morning that France succeeds in blocking the spending of any of the 150 billion euro EU defence fund on British defence companies, because apparently they've been able to say, if you want to be selling arms to Ukraine, we're not going to buy them from Britain because you're not in the European Union. He also says the money cannot be used to buy weapons from Britain, the US or Turkey, but only from EU arms companies. The fund also could consider purchasing British weapons if the UK signs a security pact with Brussels, but inexplicably France has tied this to more French fishing rights in UK waters. So once again, even though supposedly there's a crisis, a military aid crisis, France are trying to be protectionist.
Exactly. France is doing what it always does best, putting its own interest before everybody else, even if that includes the security of the entire continent. And we know why that is, because Britain is the biggest arms revenue generator in Europe, 42 billion. The French are just behind that at 40 billion, and only got the Germans well below that. And this is simply designed to increase their share of Europe's revenue here, and tying it into increased fishing rights with the French.
What's that got to do with
what is the connection to that, to the whole thing? It's bizarre.
Yeah, but
it's not bizarre, it's predictable,
It's very French, isn't it? And the other story that's very interesting and quite funny, actually, is in the Telegraph this morning. And basically, France are going to issue survival manuals to citizens to prepare them for invasion and any other imminent threat. It's a 20-page booklet, reportedly includes 63 measures to help the French in case of armed conflict. So presumably the first page says, just surrender. Get yourself a white flag, get out there and wave it.
I was going to say, does it come along with a white flag? It's part of the booklet. Cut out your own white flag.
Yeah, free white flag.
And wear that too. I mean, look, and they're also saying, in case of a nuclear leak, lock your door.
Okay.
That's going to make all the difference.
Work.
Did you put the chain on, Henri? Yes, the chain's on the door. Don't worry, we'll be fine.
Maybe wear a mask, because that'll help as well.
But, look, nobody loathes and detests Putin more than I do, and I think he's a demagogue and he wants to conquer his neighbours, but the idea that he's going to come into France and Germany or whatever is absolute nonsense for the birds.
It's not happening, is it? It really is completely and utterly ridiculous. Officials from the General Secretariat for Defence and National Security, who created the guide, insisted that the aim was absolutely not to prepare the population for the prospect of war, unlike in Sweden. Well, why have you done it then?
Exactly. Nothing to see here.
No, absolutely. Incredible stuff. Let's talk about Torsten Bell. This is a guy who has found himself in government work. A brand new Labour MP, who people have said to me, he's very clever, very smart man. Well, he doesn't appear to be very smart. He was pushed out to Newsnight the other night to sort of help with questions that were being asked about the benefits clampdown. Let's have a look at how he performed.
For those who can't, they'll be living on about 70 quid.
We are not going to write off 21-year-olds as unable to work.
For those who can't, they'll be living on about £70 a week. Could you live on 70 quid a week?
Absolutely not.
So why do you expect young people to?
We won't. We provide housing benefit as well, and we'll provide personal independence payments.
This is cash in their pocket. This 70
quid
cash a week. So are the
things I just mentioned to you. So are the things I just mentioned to you. That's how the benefit system works. If people need help with their rent, they receive that as well. If they need support with a disability, personal independence payments is there for that as well.
So to buy food, to pay bills,
yes,
70 quid a week. You've just told me you couldn't live on that.
Well, no, I have a mortgage to pay because of the current situation.
Yeah, Torsten doesn't have to worry about that sort of thing.
What's particularly egregious here is that Torsten Bell, for years, was the head of something called the Resolution Foundation, which was a far-left radical think tank, and they were always speaking out for the underprivileged in society. Every week on BBC
and the evil Tories.
On the Today programme, but also criticising Labour as well and policies that didn't go far enough. And in terms of selling your soul to the devil, once you get into politics, and you have to toe the party line, I mean, he's the classic example of how you can sell out your principles so easily, because none of that stuff would he ever have been saying 6 months ago or a year ago, whenever the election was.
And he wasn't very good at saying it either. Let's have a voice note from Dan.
Hi Mike, it's Dan from Lingfield here. Regarding all these freeloaders that we're hearing about recently, why is it that the taxpayer isn't being held in really high regard why isn't it mentioned that, why isn't there a thank you? Why isn't there a thank you? It's always thank you NHS, but why isn't there a thank you to the hard-working people? I got up at 5 o'clock today, 5 o'clock. I'm going to be home at 6 o'clock tonight, work my arse off. Well, I don't get no thanks.
You don't get any thanks. I mean, maybe you should be a Tory minister. Do you remember the Tory Education Minister, Ms Keegan, who said, nobody ever says thank you for all the hard work that I do. Right, yeah. And then she swore a couple of times and then was never heard from again. But yeah, he's absolutely right, though. You know, we've got now a situation, a top-heavy situation, where a smaller and smaller number of taxpayers are paying more and more tax to support a bigger and bigger government, a bigger and bigger number of people who are refusing to do any work at all, and a huge and bigger number of pensioners. You know, some of whom have got their own money, I know, but nevertheless, you know, the pendulum has kind of tilted way against those of us who actually pay tax, who support everybody else.
Yeah, biggest taxes since the Second World War, and as usual it goes on to the backs of the decent British people who get no thanks about it at all. I mean, there's nothing to add to that.
Well, all we get is more taxes. I mean, there was a line yesterday that came out quite late saying that Keir Starmer has not ruled out more stealth tax raids on income tax. So that our income tax, which is already pretty bleeding high, and many people have moved up into a higher paying tax bracket, will continue to rise. It's absolutely extraordinary. One here from Raina, who says, morning, Mike, you mentioned that doctors can't get jobs. The same applies to teachers. Schools can't afford them. I'm currently working as a supply, and many teaching assistants in schools are qualified teachers who get a pittance. Interesting. And Margaret, watching the Prime Minister's questions clip, says, morning, Mike, how could Rachel from Accounts, the first woman Chancellor, sit there smirking? She's enjoying every minute of taking the country down the pan. Well, I mean, you'd have to say you don't have to wait for Vladimir Putin to invade Western Europe, because the governments of Western Europe are doing a pretty good job of destroying their own countries, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to look at what Rachel Reeves has done to this economy in terms of, you know, why do we need to have new taxes? Because, I mean, why do we have to have all of these austerity cuts? Because of what she's done to business in this country, you know. I mean, this is the problem here. She's essentially, you know, everything that they've said that they were going to do has backfired, and the only solution is, more taxes then.
Yeah, we'll just have to take more of your money. Kelly in Yorkshire says this, morning, Mike, I've just had a letter through the post for my smear test, which says this is a test for all women and people with a uterus. You mean a woman, for heaven's sake. Great show. Kelly, thank you very much indeed for that. Coming up, we'll talk about Matt Hancock. He's on the front page of the Mirror this morning. Also, we'll be talking about new tighter gun laws being brought in the wake of that terrible case of the triple killer who was sent to prison yesterday. This is Talk.
welcome the comments, and at the moment we're finding that there's broad agreement in the UK from all sorts of different sides of politics and spectrums of belief that we do need to have this really serious conversation about how we're raising young men and what sort of future that we're enabling them to have for themselves and enabling them to take part in for the rest of society. It's a crucial conversation.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 6:49. I'm Mike Graham. It's the first day of spring, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be 21 degrees, so it's the only time to release the sausages, as we said earlier. I'm sure Keir Starmer's got something to say about that. Basically, we've got lots to do this morning. We're going to be talking about a great many things. Dan Hodges is coming up after the news. We've got Rafe Harlemagne-Koo here as well at the moment. Let's have a look at the front page of the Daily Mirror, because Matt Hancock, believe it or not, has made a return to the public gaze, which we haven't seen for many a year. We've almost forgotten about him, but according to the front page of the Daily Mirror, he has no regrets about anything that happened.
Yeah, when I saw this headline, I'll do it all again. I thought he was talking about that woman he kissed and he was madly in love with her. Yes. I thought he was going to be saying when getting married or whatever. Right. But no, it's once again the king of arrogance and the lack of hubris, saying essentially, with no shame, no apology.
Famous Sun front page.
Yeah, so apparently that also doesn't feel ashamed to apologise by. But look, this was a man, remember, who basically gave a job to his pub landlord to source tens of millions of vials from the NHS, despite having no experience whatsoever. And none of this life-saving PPE that was supposed to have come down this VIP lane actually seemed to have come through on time or of the sufficiently high quality. Right. Look, to a point, he's correct. Yes, when you're in a crisis like this, you need to basically go down any lead you can.
All hands on deck.
But there has to be some degree of competence and some degree of vetting of these people when you've got the entire arm of a civil service at your disposal.
Well, you don't suddenly just go, you know, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just ring up a few of my mates and see if they've got any ability to get some PPE organised. And the thing that I find amazing is his quote in which he says that the message by him recommending one supplier, the landlord of his local pub, was proof of his, in his words, impeccable behaviour.
Yeah, impeccably bad behaviour, I think, is what he means to say. And this is all done on WhatsApp and so forth, which again brings into question, were these WhatsApp messages ever going to be revealed, as we now know, for the inquiries and so forth? I think the whole thing was disastrous. The only Hancock I ever want to hear about in the future is Tony Hancock, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm afraid I've got bad news for you, because we've got a clip of Matt Hancock at the COVID inquiry. Let's have a look.
What you can see in all of the communications around this is my impeccable behaviour in terms of taking forward this proposal from somebody who was both a constituent and somebody trying to help in the national effort.
He seems to have less hair than he had before.
He's not great at winning people over to his side.
He's really not.
Remember, this is the guy who also created the Hancock app. Do you remember? This man is so full of his
impeccable behaviour,
belief in his own greatness.
Was there not a movie that got made years ago called My Glittering Career? You know, which was a sort of a Mickey take of a guy whose career wasn't brilliant at all. But that's kind of where Hancock is. You know, my impeccable behaviour. Let's have more examples of it. Got a couple of voice notes here on the Southgate front. Here's Steve.
Steve from Barnsley. Southgate saying it's a bad thing to game, gamble and watch porn. Oh dear. Looks like I'm going to hell.
Thanks, Steve. How about Andrew?
Morning, Mike. Gareth Southgate or Southgate, whatever, or Gary Neville 2.0. I mean, he's going on about young men, you know, being drawn into watching pornography and gaming and stuff like that. I mean, I'm 54. You know, when I was a young man or a teenager, 17, 18, I was playing on games and stuff, you know, like on the Atari or the ZX Spectrum or whatever, and looking at porn as well, you know, the old readers' wives and stuff. So I don't see how things are any different now to what they were then, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange, isn't it? Perry says this on Twitter. Never mind Gareth Southgate giving a talk about young men suffering with depression. What about people of my age? I had to sit and watch England when he was the manager, and now that was really depressing. It's absolutely true. One from James, though, who disagrees. He says, regardless of your personal view of Gareth Southgate, what did he say that isn't true? Young men are feeling isolated and do have a lack of strong, positive role models. Mentorship and real-world opportunities are on the decline. And what is wrong about giving that airtime? Well, there's nothing wrong with giving it airtime, James, but I'm just having a view of what the airtime that he has been given is all about, because Gareth Southgate is being painted as this sort of, Renaissance man, when, as I say, he's being lionised for not winning anything, and maybe that's part of the problem. Young men need leadership, yes, they do, but they don't need leadership to say it doesn't matter whether you win or not. They need somebody to say, actually, it's quite good to win, so get out there, be competitive, get yourself a decent job, work hard, and you'll be rewarded. Not, everybody can get a really nice lifestyle if they just be nice to each other and everybody's very, very happy. That's not the way the world works.
Yeah, and that's my issue as well. It's not so much with the content of what he's saying, it's whether he's the best person to deliver that content. And also, what he's saying is really quite basic. I would rather have somebody who's more of an expert to actually give you more analysis and insight into it. But absolutely, look, boys have a hugely difficult time because, of course, there are no role models for them in school because, 90-odd% of teachers are now female in primary school, similar number in secondary school, slightly more men in secondary school, but primarily, and also they're coming from one-parent families where the father's absent, so they essentially have no opportunities to actually have decent male role models in their own lives, so they do go on the internet and this sort of thing, or fall in with bad company. Yeah. No one's denying that, but I think there are better people who could communicate it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, there's a big spread in the Sun today talking about lost lads. A nation is glued. And also people keep talking about this Netflix drama, Adolescence, which is one of those things, whenever I hear people talking about a drama that everybody's watching, it just makes me not want to watch it. And of course, it's yet again another woke exercise in, a story about a young white working class boy who turns out to become some kind of terrorist, right?
It's funny, every programme you watch, they're throwing diversity down our throats, and then when it comes to somebody who's actually stabbing somebody, then suddenly has to be a white working-class boy, And, of course, white working-class boys are the most disadvantaged section of society, and in part it's because of this sort of messaging. They're constantly being told that they are the beneficiaries of white privilege,
toxic
that
masculinity,
they're systemically racist, toxic masculinity. It's no wonder that they're underachieving. I mean, the funniest thing that I saw in this article about the Gareth Gates thing is experts are now trying to lobby universities to actually consider young men as a minority deserving special privileges. Well, I mean, that will be the day when universities treat white men as somehow deserving of special treatment.
This is what the BBC are suddenly now deciding to do as well. They've started talking about, hiring young men from the north of England, as if only working class men live in the north of England, and the north of England is where they all come from. There are plenty of working class men around the corner from Broadcasting House if they care to actually take a look out the window. They don't have to go to, Manchester or Leeds or, parts of the Tyneside to find working class white kids.
I think they still have visions of flat caps and whippets.
They do. I think they honestly. I don't think you're wrong. A couple of funny stories in the Sun this morning. One on page 11 about Robo Kebab is the headline. Jobs could be skewered at your local kebab shop. Robots could be replacing humans to slice the meat off the. I don't know what you call that, rotisserie type arrangement.
Well, I think it's about time, because we just saw last week, we had it revealed that some of these hundreds or thousands of high-skilled workers visas are going to kebab houses.
Right.
So there are hundreds of people in kebab houses who are highly skilled.
Was there not one that had about 600
one halal guy, 900 skilled visas this guy done. So bring on the robots,
Yeah, absolutely right. Make the world a safer place. And then one on the other side of the page, chocks away for the I'm Nuts funeral. A man who said he was nuts has been buried in a Snickers-themed coffin. I mean, these stories, you can't make them up because they're so weird and bizarre.
Well, I resent this because it should be a marathon coffin.
That's one for the teenagers, right? South London-born Paul Broom, 55, basically also had the Crystal Palace FC logo on his coffin. He was a care worker and he was had his funeral in Bognor Regis in West Sussex. I mean, It's quite an unusual thing to want to be buried in a box with
what would you be buried in?
a load of logos. I don't want to be buried. I think I want to be cremated.
Wrapped in the sun?
Yeah. I don't really like the idea of being buried, to be honest.
No, I'm going to be cremated too, but I love cigars. Maybe I'll be cremated in a cigar. That might be a rather good way to go.
Somebody make you into a cigar or something like that. One from Dave in Portsmouth. Mike, I've just heard the comment about the smear test for all women. If I go to my local hospital and tell them I identify as a woman, where on earth will they be sticking their swab? I'll tell you what, the show's taken a bit of a weird turn already this morning.
It's a bit early in the morning for this,
isn't
isn't it?
Absolutely. Let's talk about Snow White, shall we? Because the reviews are in on the new woke Snow White film, and they're not very good.
Yes, I mean, this Snow White has become a hugely totemic film now, because if it does well, then basically we're going to have more woke productions.
Yeah.
If it crashes and burns, as it seems it will,
that'll be the end.
It will sound the death knell. Because, of course, Snow White was commissioned before Trump came to power, and we've had this sea change in America. It wouldn't be commissioned the way that it is today, I think. Things are changing, but this is going to be a totemic thing. And, of course, it's no surprise that it's so bad, because they've basically messed up the entire story. I mean, dwarfs are up in arms. Well, they're as up in arms as dwarfs can be. Because they've been written out of the story and then replaced by CGI characters.
Right.
Then it became Snow White and the Magical Creatures for one point.
Absolute madness.
Then, of course,
madness.
Snow White, the clue's in the name. Skin as white as snow.
Yeah.
They had to find a Latina to fill that role, who then came out and said that essentially Prince Charming is a stalker.
Yeah.
Well, I don't need to be
we're
kissed
out.
by anyone.
We're out. We're out. That's the end. Thank you, Rafe. We'll see you tomorrow.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 7. It was an amazing sunrise this morning, I should say. It's the first day of spring. The spring equinox is upon us, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be something like 21 degrees, so you can imagine what's going to happen. Everybody's going to get their T-shirts out, they're going to get their shorts out, release the sausages will be the order from Downing Street.
The return of the sausages.
Barbecues will be fired up. Everyone will go completely mad and all turn up for work on Friday. Oh, no, sorry, they won't turn up for work on Friday, will they? Because they'll stay at home. But if they were to turn up for work on Friday, you'd see them on the tube all red-faced, lobster-like, because they've forgotten to put the sun cream on. So I'm not even going to say it, because there's no way that this is the sort of show that warns you to put sun cream on, even if they want you to. What I will say to you, though, is enjoy the good weather, because we can do with some cheering up, couldn't we? I mean, you know, we've got absolutely one bad news story after another. We will try and keep you amused for the course of the next 3 hours. We're here until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Greer will be along. We've got Dan Hodges coming up, commentator at the Mail on Sunday. He's been saying some quite interesting things about Labour policy currently and the way that things are going, because we've got the front page of The Guardian today saying basically Rachel Reeves' mini budget statement next week is going to be akin to austerity. There's going to be so many more public sector cuts coming through the system that actually it's going to be worse than it was under George Osborne. Is it really? How effective is that going to be? Also, we'll be talking about the rise of Nigel Farage and reform, because apparently an awful lot of what might have been described as Labour voters are thinking about voting the other way. Loads of Labour councillors defecting from Labour as well before the May local elections. It's all kicking off. Even old Matt Hancock's back in the news this morning as well, so we'll talk a bit about that. 0344 499 1000. Big meeting of generals going on this morning as well to try and move the peace process a little bit further on from where it's currently been stalling, basically, because Vladimir Putin's kind of digging his heels in and saying, well, I'm not doing that, so you have to come up with some better ideas, I'm afraid, quite frankly. 5 minutes past 7. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And perhaps one of the more amusing stories this morning is from France, where apparently the French have issued, or are going to be issued, with survival manuals. Citizens are going to be told to prepare for invasion or any possible other imminent threat. And as I've been saying, obviously the front page of that would have them, here's your cut out and keep do-it-yourself white flag, which you can just wave when anybody comes in to invade you, because that's what they normally do. Let's talk to Dan Hodges and see what he's up to. Dan, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm intrigued by this idea of the French survival guide, what to do if you get invaded. I mean, do you think we should have one as well for, you know, what to do if you see some illegal migrants walking down the road?
Well, I don't know about being invaded. I think we could probably do with a survival guide.
A survival guide to get through, to get us through the summer.
The policies of the government. At the
moment.
Know.
Yeah, I mean, you've been quite critical of them this week, I see on Twitter. You know, we've got Rachel Reeves announcing the biggest spending cut since austerity, front page of The Guardian today. And you're saying, why don't Labour ministers just go out and start delivering leaflets for reform? Do you think that's what's going to happen then in terms of the effects of this?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's already happening. I mean, that tweet was in response to a focus group was conducted in one of the sort of red wall seats, which I think it was a focus group of 20 people, and at the end of the focus group, I think they were Labour voters. 18 said they were now going to support reform, 1 Labour and 1 the Tories. And, you know, this is a direct result of, I mean, I wrote about it at the weekend as well as yesterday, frankly, the insanity of the economic and political policies that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are now pursuing. Because if you remember, at the beginning of this, Rachel Reeves did a budget in which she hiked up taxes because she said she had to protect public services after years of underinvestment for the Tories. You could agree with that, you could not agree with that, but that was her strategy. Then at the start of the year, she suddenly tore that strategy up. You remember we had the big speech from her and Keir Starmer in which they said their priority was going to be growth. They were going to stimulate growth. Well, if you want to stimulate growth, fine, but the government strategy for stimulating growth is currently to impose £40 billion of taxes on British business, to introduce new workplace regulation, to introduce new, a drive towards net zero, and according to reports, now begin to slash public spending. We saw the announcement of the welfare reforms, or the so-called welfare reforms, yesterday, which I think you and I think most people viewing this programme would agree there is huge scope to get people who can work, claiming benefits, back into work, but that's not what these reforms do. They specifically target people who are genuinely disabled, people who cannot wash themselves, people who cannot cook properly for themselves. And that is the result. This is where we've ended up. And again, it doesn't matter where you sit, I think, on the political spectrum. I think we can all recognise the Tories were thrown out of power last year because people wanted change. And what they're seeing is a Labour government that is either the same or worse than the Tories. And there is going to be, I think, a political backlash to this, the like of which we haven't seen.
Well, I think that's right, and I mean, we've been getting calls. We've had guests on the show. I had a guy from Canterbury the other day who's been running a business for 26 years, catering and hospitality business attached to the rugby club in Canterbury. He's shutting it down after 26 years. He said it's just not worth my while to put the minimum wage. He hires a lot of 18 to 21-year-olds who work as casual waiters and waitresses. He said, the minimum wage goes up £3 an hour for 5 or 6 people. That makes my life unsustainable. Same with the national insurance rise. And there's a lot of businesses I'm hearing from who would just say, we're just going to shut down because it's not worth it anymore. And so the growth isn't coming from anywhere. But what I'm interested in is when did Keir Starmer suddenly become a Tory? We had Richard Tyson here the other day saying, well, this is about the third reform policy he's copied in the last 3 months.
Well, I mean, this is the key thing. So we have had governments that have pursued radical policies before. We've had governments that have pursued policies of austerity before. Obviously, we famously had, Margaret Thatcher's government. She pursued a very radical agenda, which involved obviously significant cuts to public services. We obviously had after Brown, we had the Cameron Osborne government that also, pursued quite a radical programme of austerity. But the difference is both of those administrations said very clearly to the British people before they were elected, this is what we're going to do. This government told the British people we would be different. We were told we have a properly costed plan. We would not need a return to austerity. We would need significant tax cuts.
Well, I seem to remember they kept repeating mantra-like that everything was fully costed and they wouldn't do anything that wasn't fully costed. They don't say that anymore, do they?
No, fully costed. Now, as I said, immediately after Labour came in, we had the budget from Rachel Reeves, which she said, I found this black hole from the Tories. I've got no option but to raise taxes to protect public services. Fine, that was a political and economic decision she took. But as I said, at the start of this year, she suddenly turned around, and Keir Starmer turned around and said, oh, no, forget all that. Our priority is now growth. So, and we will see next week when the OBR publish their forecasts that as a direct result of the policies that the government is pursuing, growth will have collapsed. And as a result of that, according to the reports we're getting today, the government is going to announce a new wave of austerity. Now, Labour has not got anywhere to hide. Keir Starmer hasn't got anywhere to hide, and Rachel Reeves haven't got anywhere to hide. These are policy decisions and policy choices they've taken, and they're going to have to own it. And I don't think, frankly, and remember, Labour won the election with 34% of the vote. People weren't out in the streets, cheering Labour, Keir Starmer's triumphant march up Whitehall. It was basically, OK, we're not entirely sure about you guys. We'll give you a chance. Now, the jury, I think, on Labour is almost in.
Yeah.
And if they announce as we're being reported today, an agenda of what is essentially austerity in all but name, then watch out, because Labour were not beloved in this country when they won the last election. And as I said, don't think people voted for this.
No, of course they didn't. And nothing that they said they would do have they done. And all the things that they said they wouldn't do, they have done. It's been a sort of reverse of a manifesto. I don't know what the opposite of manifesto is, but that seems to what they've done. We've got some breaking news just as we speak. The rate of UK unemployment remained unchanged at 4.4%. I suspect that's going to go up in the next month or two. UK average regular earnings growth remained at 5.9%. And for me, even that is a bit of a false figure, because the reason growth is up in regular earnings is because of the public sector pay rises that they gave out, as opposed to what people are actually earning. And Keir Starmer still keeps repeating this ridiculous phrase, you know, putting money into working people's pockets, which he's clearly not doing. He's taking money out of people's pockets.
But this is the point. I mean, I remember us discussing at the time, and I remember us having an argument at the time. I think, in fact, you accused me of being maybe a communist or a Marxist at the time.
Sounds unlikely.
For actually saying, I could understand what Rachel Reeves did in her first budget. Right, she did inherit a black hole. We can argue how bad it was. She did inherit a situation where public services had been eroded, and everybody could feel basically the fabric of the country it felt like was falling apart. She had a choice. She could raise taxes on hardworking British people, or she could raise taxes on business, and she chose to raise taxes on business. Fine, that was a strategy. But then in January, she completely ripped it up. She said, that's not what we're doing anymore. Right. My priority is not protecting public services anymore. My priority is stimulating growth. Yeah. What we are going to see next week is that not only she is neither stimulating growth nor protecting public services, at which point the question has to be, what is Rachel Reeves for? What is Keir Starmer for?
Exactly.
And what is the Labour government for?
Yeah. Well, because it seems to me, you know, people used to make hay about Dominic Cummings' description of Boris Johnson like a sort of a runaway shopping trolley in a supermarket aisle. I mean, it seems to me that this government is like, and they've all piled into the back of a transit van, and they're driving down a very narrow street with parked cars on either side, smashing all the mirrors off. Because that's what they seem to be doing, and they're lurching from one weird thing to another. I mean, you know, 1 minute they're not going to cut public services, the next thing they're abolishing NHS England. And you go, oh, we're going to make 9,500 people redundant. Are you really? I mean, I think people don't believe a word they say either, which is also a problem.
But this is the thing. I mean, you're saying that they're smashing down the road, knocking off the wing mirrors. They're smashing down the road, demolishing the cars and the houses and ripping the street apart. Because this is the thing I don't understand. As I said, I wrote about this. Just to reiterate, Rachel Reeves has said her priority is stimulating growth. Now, I'm not. This isn't a political point I'm about to make. If we have a chancellor who thinks the way you stimulate growth is to simultaneously load £40 billion of taxes on business, introduce a huge new framework of red tape and workplace regulation, to say to British businesses, you have to get to a point where you have zero emissions in net terms, and simultaneously start to slash public spending. If you think that is how to stimulate growth, it's not. You know, I don't go with this. It's not Rachel from accounts. It's Rachel from the madhouse.
Yeah.
It's from the loony bin. This is not going to work.
Right. But also, she spent months, didn't she?
Basic. You know, even the most junior economic student knows that is not how you can possibly stimulate growth.
And she is an economist after all, so she should know better. But, you know, look at it this way as well. She spent the first few months telling us that the only way to get growth, or the only way they were going to get growth, was having taxed or going to be taxing businesses in the private sector, but by making investment in the public sector. So for the first 6 months, it was all about, we're going to pump money into the public sector. We're going to get partnerships with investors. You remember that investment summit where they didn't invite anybody interesting to, and it was all about pledging, you know, billions and billions of pounds for public sector kind of shared projects. Now they're cutting back on it, so you can't have it both ways, can you? You can't make growth one way and then make growth the completely opposite way.
But this is you're exactly right, and this is the point. There are broadly two ways that you can stimulate growth in the economy. There is a sort of there is a right-wing philosophy, a perfectly legitimate right-wing philosophy, which says the way you stimulate the economy is you cut taxes, you allow business to flourish, and then you take the additional revenue that is generated from that and you invest in public services. That is a perfectly legitimate. People can debate about whether now is the right time to pursue that approach, but that's a perfectly legitimate economic philosophy. There's also a left-wing philosophy which says you do the opposite. You don't initially cut taxes, you raise taxes, invest that in the public services, you effectively pump prime the economy, that stimulates growth, you reinvest that, and that is how you support investment in public service and boost the economy. Again, you can have a debate about that, but that is a perfectly legitimate left-wing philosophy and an economic philosophy. What Rachel Reeves is doing is the complete opposite of that. She's simultaneously raising taxes, she's cutting public expenditure, she's introducing new red tape and regulation, she's tying the albatross of net zero around the British economy, and she's expecting the economy to grow. And this isn't a debating point. We're going to have the OBR are going to publish their figures next week, and we are going to see what the impact of those policies are. And it's no point her turning round and trying to say, "Oh, it's nothing to do with me, Gov. It's all because of Donald Trump and his tariffs."
Right. Well, she got slapped down from Downing Street.
Well, exactly. Obviously, Keir Starmer then panicked because he obviously won't allow anybody to say anything even remotely nasty about his new mate Donald Trump at the moment. Right. But it's just it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's literally ridiculous. As I said on Sunday, we are now reaching Liz Truss levels of economic illiteracy. It's utter madness.
But where is it going to end, though, Dan?
Well, I mean, look, I'll tell you where it's going to end. I mean, the first place it's going to end is we've got local elections coming up in a few weeks' time, and it is going to end in an absolute bloodbath.
That's going to be carnage, isn't it, for Labour?
For the Labour Party and the Tories, because obviously all of this going on, I mean, I don't know what Kemi Badenoch's doing. I mean, I don't know where she is or what she's doing, or
I'm not sure she knows what she's doing.
No, I mean, I'm not entirely, I'm not entirely sure she knows. So what we're going to see is, I mean, as I said, I mean, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are basically, and Kemi Badenoch, are all collectively acting now as recruiting sergeants for Nigel Farage. I mean, if Nigel Farage had wanted to write a political script after the general election, it would be this. I mean, what is Nigel Farage and Reform's key message? They're all the same.
Yeah.
The two main parties, there is no difference between the two main parties. We've now got a Labour Party which is about to announce, we're told next week, announce a wave of austerity. I mean, so that will be the first thing, and then I think, frankly, Labour MPs and the Labour Party will panic, and at that point. And we were actually seeing it. I mean, I think one of the things that's happened is the political narrative, as it does, has shifted, obviously, around Ukraine. What Keir Starmer's been, Keir Starmer appearing, statesman-like, etc. And a lot of people were saying, we had a Labour MP saying this is his Falklands. It's going to completely transform his political fortunes. Now, I said consistently it wouldn't. I'm about to see
and
that.
It's all gone a bit quiet, hasn't it?
It's all that's gone quiet now, and then. We are going to see, I think, after the local elections, we are going to see a huge backlash within the Labour Party for the government's political direction, and very, very serious questions asked about Starmer and Rachel Reeves.
Yeah, and the panic will very much set in. Listen, it's very disturbing this morning. I mean, the sun's up, first day of spring. We're agreeing with each other. I've got this from Chris. He says, "Morning, Mike. What's happened to Dan Hodges? He's actually talking common sense."
Oh my God!
I mean, for heaven's sake!
I've obviously pushed it too far.
You've obviously, you're going to get disowned yourself by the Labour Party if it carries on like this. Anyway, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Dan Hodges there, commentator with the Mail on Sunday. Even he thinks the government's going doolally, because you can't convince anyone unless you're somebody like Torsten Bell that anything that they're doing has got any sense to it whatsoever. And they started off telling us that, you know, they costed absolutely everything. They wouldn't do anything unless it was fully costed. Then they decided that they didn't have any money, so they couldn't do anything at all. Then they started talking down the economy, so much so that the economy crashed and investment got pulled out of the country at about 1 million miles an hour. Millionaires started leaving the country. Businesses started shutting down. You know, international companies decided not to base themselves here. You know, car companies started shutting down their factories. Then they suddenly realised we better start talking the economy up, because we're going to get some investment coming in now into the public sector. That's what we'll do, because that will really work well. And they didn't really get much investment, so none of those projects worked. So then they decided that they might have to go after businesses in this country and start taxing them all. So they did that in the budget in November. Then they decided that wasn't enough money coming in. So in fact, now they're going to have to go after some disabled people and take some money off them. Now they're thinking that the best way to get out of a crisis is to create a bigger crisis and make it look like it will be better once we've got through it. What are they doing? Does anybody know? It's 7:23.
Here's the thing, he says, Farage is incapable of saving the UK. In office, he would do massive damage. We love our country. We'll fight on. Are you incapable of saving the UK, and would you do massive damage in office?
Is this the same Ben Habib who lost election after election? Is this the same Ben Habib who, when he was deputy leader of the party, failed to get any of the candidates vetted, which caused us such problems at the general election, and failed to get us to stand in more than 12% of seats last year? Is that the same fella?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
26 minutes past 7. Welcome back to A Morning Glory. We've got plenty to do. It's the first day of spring. The spring has sprung. We're going to be speaking shortly to Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. We're not going to have everybody called Hodges in this hour, I have to say. We had Dan Hodges, now we've got Ben Hodges. I don't know who the next guest is called Hodges. Who can say? Let's get a voice note from Liam.
Morning, Mike. Liam from Kent. Bit same as one of your other voice noters. I just got up at 3:30 this morning. I might be lucky if I'm home by 6, 7 o'clock tonight, where I drive for a living. And my taxes have been going up and up and up the last few months. And it annoys me when I know there's people that live on my road with brand new cars, go on holiday 3-4 times a year. And I know I'm paying for that. I'm half tempted the next time they pack their bags up to go on holiday to say thank you for that. I'm coming with you since I help contribute towards it. Keep up the common sense, Mike. Great show.
Liam, good to hear from you. Thank you very much. Liam's right. I mean, he's the second caller today to say, you know, I'm getting up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. You know, me too. We pay our taxes. You know, what do we get for it? Somebody empties the bin once in a while. That's about it. You know, when I had my phone nicked, I went to the police officer across the road. He said, best thing to do is report it online. I said, well, can I report it to you since you're a police officer? No. Best not to. I said, he's gone that way, by the way. He said, I can't go after him because I can't get over the curb in my van. You know, that's the police for you. I mean, just extraordinary stuff. But people are sick to the back teeth of being told that they're going to be paying more taxes, told that they're going to have to fund this and fund that, fund the other, even though they just keep working hard and getting nowhere and treading water while the price of everything goes up, while the council tax rockets by £20 a month, where some people are now paying, on average, more than £2,000 a year. Water rates up 30%, you know, electricity going up again in April by £111, the price cap being busted once again. You know, people have had enough. They're sick and tired of it. Even if you get the sausages out for the barbecue this afternoon, even they're more expensive than they were even a week ago. But let's talk about not so much taxpayer waste as what we're going to do with Ukraine, because there's a big meeting of generals today in London. We're going to talk now to Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former commander of the US Army in Europe. Ben, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. The Coalition of the Willing is what they're calling it. I mean, it's been called that before. The question is, how willing is the Coalition of the Willing to do really much of anything?
Well, for me, the bigger question is willing to do what?
Right.
I have to say, I'm very pleased to see UK and France leading efforts to get Europe to address the terrible security challenges it faces from Russia, particularly if my own country falters or begins to step away from this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not clear quite yet, is it? I mean, you're probably a more seasoned observer of these things than I am. In terms of where we are with the kind of the peace process, for what it's worth, Vladimir Putin seems to have sort of thrown his hat down on the table and just gone, well, either you like that or you don't, or I'm just going to walk away.
Well, I think, you know, he actually has no interest in a real peace, a sustainable peace. Vladimir Putin has not stepped away from a single one of his objectives, which includes the destruction of Ukraine as a state. He will never tolerate a sovereign Ukraine as long as he is alive.
Right.
And so these talks between him and my president, when my president comes out and says, oh, we had a great conversation today, and the Russians have agreed to a ceasefire against energy infrastructure, and then within hours, the Russians are attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure. So we are not dealing with somebody who's really interested in a true peace.
Right. So is there any point in trying to find one then, in your view?
Well, of course. I mean, tens of thousands of innocent people are killed. Stand fast the soldiers that are killed defending their country, the Ukrainians. But the civilians that are being killed by these attacks from Russian drones and missiles and so on against the cities. So, of course, it's worth trying to bring this to a halt. But the Ukrainians know that a ceasefire only gives the Russians something else to violate without a force. And this is where I think what UK and France are trying to do is to come up with a force that could compel Russia to live up to some ceasefire that might eventually be agreed.
Yeah, because, I mean, I guess the other thing Putin knows is that both the US citizens and citizens of Europe, to a large extent, are not really happy continuing to pay for a war which doesn't appear to be going anywhere.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that. There is still the majority of Americans who support Ukraine and who understand that Russia is the bad guy here. Forget whatever.
Oh,
comes
sure.
out.
But what I'm saying is they don't want to spend billions and billions and billions of pounds for years and years and years to come for no apparent gain, really.
Well, I disagree. That's not an accurate description of how the money is being used. Most of the money, at least in the U.S., that's been spent for Ukraine was spent in American factories producing ammunition and equipment that replaces what we have provided for Ukraine. So this has actually not been pallets of money put on C-17s and then flown over to Ukraine, which is how it gets characterized by critics and opponents. So, you know, if we think about what's happening, Ukraine is actually, that's the front line. And if they fail, there will be millions more Ukrainian refugees pouring into Central and Western Europe, continued disruption of grain and energy shipments from the Black Sea region that affect prices in UK as well as in the United States. And it will also, of course, embolden Russia. They will see that the West is not united, and that also emboldens China. So this is a big deal. This is not about charity for Ukraine.
No, sure, but again, I mean, certainly much of the money that has been pledged from the UK, I don't speak for the European nations, but certainly money that's gone from the UK has very much gone, not always as military aid, it's gone as aid. Into Ukraine. So the physical money has gone there. People certainly in this country, to a large extent, don't want to see an open-ended contract, if you like, where that just continues unabated for the rest of time, and the war is a kind of stalemate.
I can finally agree with you, Mike.
Thank you.
What has been missing all along is a failure by the U.S. government, both under President Biden and now President Trump, and under various prime ministers, to clearly identify the strategic outcome. What is the objective? This is the job of our civilian leaders. What is the strategic objective for what we are doing? And I think most people, if they believe that their civilian leadership are telling them, speaking to us as if we're adults, then I think most people will understand and are willing to do it.
True, but again, I don't know what the objective is, and I'm not sure Keir Starmer knows what the objective is either, because, he doesn't want, certainly people don't want to commit British troops on the ground. Putin has said that he wouldn't accept peacekeeping troops in Ukraine anyway. So what is the objective at the end of the day? Because if you say the objective is to beat Putin, I'm not sure that at the current sort of leverage that's achievable.
So, first of all, Ukraine is a sovereign country, so Russia does not get to decide whether or not Ukraine hosts British, French, American, German troops or troops from anywhere else. So this is part of the problem. Russia is given wide latitude to make decisions that affect other sovereign countries. That's part of what has to stop. What is the objective? The objective should be restoration of Ukraine's sovereign territory back to the 1991 borders, because the international rules-based order, which is sovereignty, freedom of navigation, respect for law, these are all things that affect British citizens, American citizens, European citizens, not just Ukrainians. So when you say, well, there's no way we can stop Russia, of course there is. The Ukrainians have stopped Russia. They can't push them out by themselves, of course. And this, when you look at the economic power of the West, it dwarfs Russia. And we have not even seriously tried to use our economic power to force Russia to stop.
We haven't, and maybe that's the next phase that will happen. But we'll be talking about this for a long time, I suspect. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges there with his view on what's going on over in the United States of America. Jim in Dorset says, wow, for Dan Hodges to be this scathing, Labour are toast, surely. Are we getting the sense of an early election? I flaming well hope so. Well, I mean, they don't have to have one, but I mean, it could be that disastrous in May that the Labour government takes a serious hard look at itself, and the Labour Party looks at Keir Starmer and says, mate, you are a dud, you are not working, and you need to be replaced. That could happen. Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike. From Southend. Starmer and Macron. Now they're having this little conference of the willing, whatever that is. I still can't understand it. Discussing plans and moving it up one to operational things, While Trump's over there trying to get peace, these two seem to be wanting the war to continue. From what I can see, it's only for the fact that they want the money spent on arms, so it boosts our economy. But now Macron says, oh, we're not going to spend any euro money on British arms unless we give away fishing rights, etc. So Starmer's being played, and he can't see it.
He's being played from every angle, isn't he? He's been played by Donald Trump. He's been played by Macron. He's been played by every other European leader because he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he's floundering around like some kind of, boy racer who's first time in a car. Doesn't have a clue. Morning, Mike. Has Dan been hypnotised, says Lisa. Yeah, very good. And Steve says, can we have a guide to being invaded? Because we're being invaded each and every day. Well, I was saying that a little bit earlier. Yeah, well, it wouldn't be the same as the French one, which starts off with a do-it-yourself DIY white surrender flag. Build it yourself and then wave it in front of whoever comes up to your door. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:38. I'm Mike Graham. We are here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock for a glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. Got some great tweets coming in on the Gareth Southgate front, actually. The two best role models I can think of, says Tony from Sussex, is the two people I'm watching right now on talkTV, and that would be me and Rafe. Rafe's not here anymore, but there's another very substantial individual coming up, Stephen Barrett, who's a barrister. We'll talk to him as well. And a couple of other of you say this. Starmer said Rachel Reeves will make history, says Alan in Merseyside. I agree. She'll be the first female chancellor to ruin the country in less than a year. Congratulations. Quite an achievement. It is absolutely right, isn't it? Absolutely utterly ridiculous. And John says on Gareth Southgate, shouldn't he have been facing backwards the way his football team used to play? Yeah, there is that. I mean, he's not a role model, I'm sorry. I mean, you can say he's a nice guy if you like. You can say that all the time. Kenny from Edinburgh says, morning, Mike. Who's your strong male role model? Is it Gareth Southgate, Churchill, Trump or Rosie O'Donnell? I don't actually have one. I don't really need a role model, thanks very much indeed. My father was my role model, he was great, but he's not around anymore. So let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. I like Dan Hodges. I read most of his columns and usually agree with him until he comes on your show and usually just spoils himself, really, because he's, you know, he seems like a really nice fella. But this morning he's done all right. He's took one of your common sense pills before he came on, so I can go to work feeling relatively happy this morning that we're all on the same page.
Yes.
That this government are absolutely rubbish.
Yeah, I think we can all certainly agree on that. But also, I consider it to be a great victory for common sense that we've managed to turn Dan Hodges into somebody that makes more sense than he used to. Because that's what we're all about here at the World Headquarters of Common Sense. This is, of course, Morning Glory. Let's talk to Stephen Barrett, who is, of course, a barrister and a man that knows a thing or two about the law. Stephen, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you. Let's talk about the sentencing of Nicholas Prosper, because you and I have spoken many times about whether or not sentencing is done correctly, whether or not the sentence is handed out right, how the judges handle the fact that some people don't want to appear. In most recent cases, that guy, Carl Clifford, wouldn't come to a sentencing hearing. Let's see what the judge said yesterday to Prosper.
I was told at 8:45 this morning that you were refusing to attend court. I ordered that you had to be brought. You do not want to be here, but it is not your choice. You have to face the consequences of your actions, to hear the court's sentence passed in public, and it is important for those who loved your victims to see you sentenced. The facts underlying these convictions are chilling.
I think it's time that we had a judge that said something like that, and we give judges quite a hard time on this show from time to time, so nice to be able to say, well done, to one of them. Because it really, I mean, we keep being told, don't we, Stephen, that, you know, you can't make somebody sit in a courtroom and listen to the sentencing. Well, you can, can't you?
Yes, you can. And I really do hope that all those lawyers who were more than happy to go on the media when Lucy Letby refused to go and hear her sentence and said that there was no power for the judge to order the person to go, I really hope that they watched this judge and now realise that there is a power and that we've never been weak, we're not pathetic, we can make people do things. Prisoners are bad people and they don't get to decide how to behave. This judge deserves absolute praise for this, as does Mr. Justice Goose, who dealt with Axel Rudiker-Barner in a similarly tough way. And we need tough and robust judges who will get people to face justice.
Yes, I think so. And it's always been something that the sort of the Health and Safety Brigade have said that is unwise. You know, you don't want to make somebody do something against their will. They might get injured being dragged into a courtroom, or they might be disruptive and all of those things. But, you know, she's proven just by being strong-willed and very definitive that you don't need to worry about any of that stuff.
Yep. She absolutely has, and we just need to grow up and realise what we're willing to put up with. I mean, you know, Axel Rudiker-Barner he was made to come in, and then he was taken out because he kept basically just screaming. Now, we are going to have to, as a nation, think about what we want to do in those circumstances. But we should start from the view that we can do whatever we are willing to tolerate. But this judge was absolutely brilliant and made him face justice. I mean, this guy is a monster, Mike. The facts of what this young man did, are horrendous. Yeah. Absolutely horrendous. I mean, I do think that. The sentence has actually been referred already.
Yes. Because he didn't get a full life term, did he?
He didn't get a full life term, so I'm afraid I can't just lavish praise on the judge. You know, I do have to point that out. Right. I mean, the one thing that made my spidey sense tingle, if you like, is that she said, having reflected, I agree with the parties. Now, that means, to my mind, that both barristers must have suggested that he didn't get a life sentence. Now, obviously, it's the job of the defence barrister to suggest that, but it's not necessarily the job of the prosecution barrister, so I'm not entirely sure why the parties were suggesting
There's not really any logic to that, is there?
There's not, and again, I would call for more participation of the general public in sentencing. This is not a matter for expertise, okay? It gets dressed up as expertise, but it really is not expertise. This is a personal political opinion of how people should be treated, and not as a lawyer, but just as a human being, Mike. I think that people who do what he did should not get out of prison.
No.
And just so your listeners know, he shot his own mother in the head while she was asleep. He then proceeds to hunt down and shoot his 13-year-old sister. He stabbed his little brother over 100 times and then shot him. He was then planning to do something far, far worse, but he got caught because a neighbour or somebody tipped off the police, and thank goodness he got caught. Yeah. But that's not, to my mind, a reason to not send him to prison. No. Just because we got lucky, I don't think that's a good reason. And the judge gave 3 reasons, and one of her 3 reasons was, well, you didn't go on to do even worse things. But I don't think that's a proper reason.
No, I mean, I was watching a report on this yesterday afternoon when I was at home, and the reporter outside the courtroom said, you know, it could have been so much worse. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, but I mean, it was pretty bad as it was. It's not as if, you know, it was a small thing that happened. It was a terrible thing that happened, and it doesn't matter whether the other thing that might have been more terrible didn't happen. Surely that's not the point.
Well, I would think so, and I don't follow the judge's logic there. The second reason she gave is that he was 18 or near 18 at the time. That may or may not be important, depending on your view. And just to be absolutely fair to the judge, the third reason was that he pled guilty, which, I mean, that is a long-standing principle that is a reason to sort of reduce the sentence. She did send him down for 49 years, so it is a substantial period of time. But I think the public need to have a much stronger voice in sentencing, and I think most of the public would not want this guy getting out.
But you will be very much alone in that view, won't you, in the legal fraternity, because they like nothing more than to wrap themselves up in this sort of cotton wool of intellect, and that, you know, we can't let the stupid people decide anything, because what do they know? You know, we've done this for years and years. We've studied to be barristers. We know everything there is to know about the law, and the poor little people, I'm afraid, are just not really equipped to be able to make those kinds of decisions.
Well, you just know that that's a stance I will never take.
No, I know that, but there's not many lawyers that would agree with you, though.
No, well, but dressing things, you see, it's so tempting, Mike, isn't it? If you can pretend that your personal political opinion is not actually your personal political opinion, it's your expertise, then you get to feel good and gracious about your personal political opinion. And I can see why that's tempting. I can see why it's seductive, but it's intellectually it's nonsense. So even if I didn't morally think that was wrong, I intellectually couldn't ever suggest that because I'm being disingenuous.
No, quite.
But yes, I may be a lone voice. If I am, well, at least I exist.
Well, it's good to be a lone voice sometimes. Sometimes it's better, actually, to be a lone voice, because you get heard by more people. Good to talk to you, Stephen. Thanks very much indeed. Stephen Barrett there, a barrister who says, bring more people into the sentencing decision-making process. I don't know if that's a bad idea. I think it might well go along with that, because killers like this man who's not been sentenced to a full life term, surely should have been. Let's get a voice note from Joanne on Dan Hodges.
Morning, Mike. Joan from Norfolk. So, been watching Dan Hodges. What's happened? Has he taken off his Starmer rose-coloured glasses and suddenly started seeing the light? What we've all been saying since Labour came in. He's had an epiphany. Is it because it's the spring? Who knows? Anyway, great show. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Joanne. It could well be the spring, something to do with the solstice, something to do with maybe he's been down at Stonehenge, rubbing himself up against the stones. Who knows? But he's certainly welcome to join the cavalcade and the revolution of common sense, because that's what we all are. Dan from Kent talking about that new list of countries that came out, where we've apparently dropped down the list of happiest countries by 4 places. Dan from Kent says it's a bit ironic. The happiest place to live is Finland, who share a massive border with Russia. It's true. And one from Jessica, who says in Dover, you're right, your callers and messages are right. The same people are being forced to pay out for the same people all the time, being punished for daring to have achieved or saved or planned, and disdained for not being any kind of minority. We've all had enough of that. I think you speak for all of us, Jessica, when you say that. Coming up, we're going to talk to Stephen Wolfe, because one of the things about the summer solstice and the winter solstice and the spring solstice, which we're suffering from or enjoying today, is that it's going to be a very nice warm day on the seas. And you know what that means? Yeah, that's right. A load more economic migrants will be coming to see us from parts overseas, from France, basically. They'll all be arriving, even as we speak. So we'll find out what that means from Stephen Wolfe.
talking to Cubans and Russians and whatever, and he takes the gun out and he goes boom, 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 3 bullets, 1 kills the president. You did those iconic shots of Jackie O in her Chanel suit, the pillbox hat, climbing over the back, trying to hold her husband's head together, push the brains back in. I know it sounds gruesome, but God help us, that's what happened. And then they're going, what happened? And in many ways, this leads to, all roads weirdly lead to, there was the Warren Commission. Yep. That government commission said he did it.
Yes.
And that's the end of it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:53. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, of course, this morning. It is the hottest day of the year today, so you can imagine what's going to be happening down on the east-south coast of this country. That's right, more and more people coming over on the small boats. Let's get a quick voice note, though, from Tony.
Morning, Mike. Tony from Stoke-on-Trent. Good news, mate. I've just seen another Mike Graham's Morning Glory bumper sticker in Standish, near Wigan. I couldn't take a photograph as I was driving, but yeah, the word is spreading, mate. The word is spreading. Come on, keep up the good work.
Come on, Tony. Very good. Thank you very much indeed. If you see anybody driving one of these on the back of their car, by the way, or the back of their truck or the back of their van, do let us know, because it's always good. So up in Wigan there's a bumper sticker, the home of common sense. The word is definitely spreading. Brian says this, Mike, this is a great time to tell Macron, if you don't stop the boats, there will be no fishing rights. Yeah, I mean, the fishing rights are always going to be a problem. They're always going to be a conversation. Let's talk to Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, because very good morning to you, Stephen. This rather nice weather today, the hottest day of the year, the spring solstice, just means that, you know, even though we've already had record numbers coming over since the Labour government got in July, it's just going to get worse this summer, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more, Mike. If you're looking at the data and the numbers, you've just mentioned it, the fastest growing set of numbers with people coming across in any time since 2018, with a total of 4,300 so far this year. And that's partly because of good weather that they had, but partly, Mike, because we had the warnings from the Europeans' own security services and border agencies that said that 2.5 million had come across last year from all the major points that enter into the European Union from the people smuggling gang routes. Right. And that means that you're right, with this weather and these numbers already indicating so, I estimate that we'll probably get around 50,000 or 60,000, even possibly hedging up to the 80,000 big numbers that we had a year or two ago.
Right. Well, because, you know, there's no way that the smuggling gangs are going to stop doing what they're doing, because they make so much money doing it. And the only incentive for them is to do more of it, because I think they're making somewhere in the region of £1 million to £2 million a week at the moment. And that will just continue, won't it?
Absolutely. Again, the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity's estimates show that we've had about £30 million is what they will have made so far. Not bad money for just under 2.5 months. Yeah. So that's a great incentive for them. But the cost to us is over 200 million to feed and fund these people for the first year alone. You know now, through the statistics being shown over the last couple of weeks from other organisations, that 60% of all social housing now is being fed by non-UK citizens, that we're spending billions, 7.5 billion, and huge numbers, right, huge numbers on people claiming benefits that weren't born in this country. So this all feeds in eventually into the economy. There's no end to it and no desire. And this is the question I'm now putting to politicians and to those in policy statements. Where is your desire to stop this? Why do you really not put any policies in that can stop this? It only leads to one question. You actually really want it to happen.
Right. I absolutely do. I mean, one warm spell earlier this month apparently saw 10 days of unbroken boat journeys, 2,339 migrants arriving in that one 10-day period alone, which is, you know, over 200 a day. I mean, we get a few more nice weeks of weather like that. It could be another 10 or 15,000 before we even get to the proper summer.
I agree. I think we're going to head for a record year of people coming across on the Channel boats. Again, I think probably up towards the top end of 80,000. We once estimated about 100,000. That fell away. But these are huge numbers, and no one's estimating how this is calculated across the government's budget. No one actually says, if we get 80,000 people coming across the Channel, it's going to cost us X. Yeah. And there's a dereliction of duty on the government and Home Office not to provide the public with the true figures of the cost of unlawful migration into this country.
Well, we found out yesterday, didn't we? The UK spends £3.5 billion, that's with a B, on public services for migrants who are on benefits, you know. And up until relatively recently, we were always told, weren't we, Stephen, that, oh, don't worry, the migrants don't claim benefits, they're not allowed to. Well, that's not true, because we're now spending billions and billions of pounds on them.
Absolutely, and I've been saying this for quite some time. There is the initial stage when they're claiming asylum, that they don't get benefits, but once we move them across to say, oh yeah, we've given you the right to remain, they're still not working. They've still not got a job, which is why we see that around 60 to 70% of Afghans are not working and claiming benefits. There's similar sort of numbers for Iranians and Iraqis, and they're the countries that come across the most on the Channel boats. So for them, it's a really easy lifestyle for them to come across here. And when you think about it, no one's putting the numbers together. When they're claiming benefits, they've still got to pay back the people smugglers. So how are they doing that? They're no doubt doing that through some of the money that they're getting from our benefit system, or they're working in the illegal black market.
Yes. Well, we had that ludicrous story, didn't we, as well yesterday, where the one guy who runs a kebab shop has somehow sponsored 900 skilled workers to come into the country on workers' visas. You're not going to tell me that they haven't ended up driving around in some kind of, illegal gang or some kind of scooter mob or something. It's just not sustainable.
It's not, Mike, and this again is one of the other areas that unfortunately we have to blame Boris Johnson, and that was the change in the rules related to skilled workers to assess that you are a skilled worker. For work.
It's a madness. It's absolutely mad. Steve, we've got to run because we're running out of time. Thank you very much indeed. Stephen Wolfe there. We'll come back to you after the news.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. The sun is up, the sky's blue, and it's going to be very warm as well. Coming up to 21 degrees, we're being told. The hottest day of the year so far, as we've just been speaking to Stephen Wolfe about. I'm afraid the bad news on that front is there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of migrants making the crossing. One has already died earlier this week. We're going to have loads and loads of boats arriving in Dover. The government will do absolutely naff all about any of that, and they'll allow these people to come here. They'll allow them to claim benefits. They'll allow them to sit in hotels for weeks and weeks on end and months on end, and they'll allow them to bring their families over as well, if they so care to do so. Meanwhile, they are continuing to ruin this country economically. You just heard in the last hour Dan Hodges, one of the staunchest supporters of the Labour Party, basically saying that Rachel Reeves is economically illiterate. The whole idea of what she's doing with the economy is complete and utter madness. It can't possibly work in the short term or in the long term. The question is, at this point, how long has Keir Starmer got to be in charge before he gets kicked out by his own party? Simple as that. We've been talking about that, plus an incredible story in The Sun this morning by Harry Cole, all about net zero. A secret report has been uncovered by The Sun in which it says that net zero will bankrupt this country financially. This is a Whitehall report that's been seen, which basically says that only the poorest in the world of this country would be the ones that would suffer. They would have to pay the big taxes. They would have to pay through the nose for all manner of things, including ULEZ charges, congestion charges. The whole net zero revolution is over, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just bury it or fire it up into space or something, because it's not working for us. Let's have a listen to what some of you have been saying this morning.
Woke up at 5 o'clock. I'm going to be home at 6 o'clock tonight. Work my arse off. Well, I don't get no thanks.
Good news, mate. I've just seen another Mike Graham's Morning Glory bumper sticker in Standish, near Wigan.
I've been watching Dan Hodges. What's happened? He's had an epiphany. Is it because it's the spring? Who knows?
I can go to work feeling relatively happy this morning that we're all on the same page, that this government are absolutely rubbish.
I think we can certainly all agree with that. Biological sex has been erased from official government data. That's one story that's on the front page of the Daily Mail. Telegraph's got a different version of it, saying basically if you're a criminal, you can pick your own gender. And then maybe, if you get sent to prison, you can pick your own prison. Should it be a male prison? Should it be a female prison? Who can say? There's a piece on the Mail as well about what being in space for 288 days really does to your body. Apparently it makes you age quicker. Extraordinary stuff. And the front page of The Sun this morning, another incredible story about a former star of Casualty, a woman called Amanda Mealing, lost control of her Mini Cooper at 10:14 a.m, hit a Skoda, injuring a nurse, and she was high on cocaine at the time. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. One here from Rob, who says, from Middlesex, love the show. This government is bonkers. They don't know how to stimulate anything except depression, downward turns and deflation. Nigel Farage for Prime Minister, let's make Britain great again. And one from Dean in Oxford, who says, you've been saying for a while Starmer will have his ground zero moment sometime this year. I bow to your insight because I think that moment isn't too far away, and Raina will challenge him very, very soon. Well, if you saw the way that Angela Raina was looking at Keir Starmer yesterday, as he was answering a question from Kemi Badenoch about the fact that he's now taxing hospices and dead children, you would see that actually she does not have any great feelings for him. Let's have a look at the clip.
He keeps talking about budget benefits. Unemployment is not a benefit. Businesses closing are not benefits. I asked him whether he would exempt hospices, even children's hospices, from the jobs tax. He did not answer that question. His MPs know that this could affect end-of-life care. So I will ask the same question again. Will he exempt hospices from paying his jobs tax?
Mr. Speaker, we've already invested £100 million for adult and children's hospices, an additional £26 million in funding through the Children's Hospices grant, but we can't get away with what we were doing in that budget, the root cause, which was fixing the economy they left so badly damaged, a £22 billion black hole. Perhaps you start the next question with an apology.
They want me to answer questions, then we can swap sides.
She says that she wants to swap sides. I mean, heaven forbid.
I'm so glad that Keir Starmer thinks it's a laughing matter that he's ruining the economy and actually putting taxes on things that should not be being taxed. Let's talk to Nigel Huddleston, Conservative Party Chairman, who's down in Westminster for us right now. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm staggered that Keir Starmer keeps getting away with saying that they inherited a troubled economy, because it's not true. You know, the economy in June of last year was a hell of a lot better than it is now.
Absolutely, and it's incredible they do keep saying that. But nobody believes it, nobody buys into it anymore. And of course we're now faced with an emergency budget next week because of the bad decisions Rachel Reeves made in the last budget, where she increased spending by £70 billion, which the country can't afford. So basically, as we all know, Margaret Thatcher used to say, the problem with socialism is they eventually run out of other people's money.
Yeah,
this quickly. You know, Rachel Reeves has already run out of money and she's having to come back and ask for more. So it's a terrible circumstance. I take no, pleasure in saying this, because they are disastrous at running the economy.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that I find particularly galling is that if the Conservative government, and you know that I haven't exactly been praiseworthy of the last Conservative government in the past, but if the Conservative government tried to do some of the things that Rachel Reeves is now attempting to do, public sector cuts, abolishing bits of the NHS, making sure that taxes went up for every single disabled person and all of that. I mean, there'd be riots in the streets, and you'd be being called the nasty party, you'd be being called, heartless, you want to take money away from, disabled and poverty-stricken people, you're cruel, you're ghastly. How is it that nobody in the Labour Party is coming out and saying that about their own bosses now?
Well, interestingly, if you saw in the Chamber of the House of Commons yesterday, some of the things that are announcing, they are now getting attacked on their own side, and it's our job as the opposition to hold them to account, and you played the clip of Kemi just doing that yesterday. But you're right, in a whole slew of things, they're coming up with things that they didn't promise in the manifesto, where they are making decisions, they're making mistakes. They are not fit for government. They promised change, we've got it, but it's not the change that people wanted, and it's not a positive change. And today we'll be launching the local election campaign, the Conservative local election campaign, because we are promising at local elections we deliver better value for money, we deliver better services and lower taxes than other parties. But one of the struggles for local government is that they are now being impacted negatively by decisions that Rachel Reeves has made. For example, as you mentioned earlier, that national insurance increase, that's added £1 billion to the cost of local government. Who's paying for that? Taxpayers, because that is now being passed on in the form of higher council tax right across the country. So there's an impact even on local government, and this is important for the local elections, of these central government decisions made by Rachel Reeves. And they're all bad decisions, and they're all impacting normal people negatively.
And with these May elections coming up, I mean, you might call it perhaps a sort of a mid-term referendum on how badly the government is doing, or otherwise, and a lot of Labour votes are probably going to disappear. But are you saying you're expecting the Tory party to do well in the local elections? Because the polls are not suggesting that.
Well, we have a really good track record locally, and we've got outstanding councillors. Many of them have been embedded in their community for many years. But we do know that this set of elections will be difficult, because we're coming off the high watermark of 2021, where we gained an extraordinary 65% of all seats up for election. So it's going to be very difficult to meet that. But if you look at local by-elections, in the last few months since the general election, we've actually won 59 seats. To give you some idea, Reform, for example, have won 12. So we're on the ground, we're delivering for local people, we're fighting hard, and we're winning many, many areas in local government. And, everybody says, the poll that really matters is the one on election day, and in the by-elections we're doing quite well. But we will be fighting hard for every single vote in every single seat.
Nigel Huddleston, thank you very much indeed. Conservative Party Chairman there, talking about the upcoming May elections. I've seen plenty of polls, by the way, which have got Reform doing very well indeed. Nigel Farage, in fact, was talking to Julie Hartley-Brewer just this week about how well they're expecting to do. Also, of course, they'll be running in that by-election in Mike Amesbury's seat in Runcorn, and they may well do very well there. They could even get that nicked off of Labour, which would be quite an achievement if you consider how strong a Labour seat that has been over the course of time. This from Stefan in Bromley says, "Morning, Mike. Nobody has come up with a simple way to stop the small boats. Pay the people smugglers to stop bringing them here. They are making millions from this, and we are paying billions in support, housing, etc." Yeah, but you can't suddenly start realising, I suppose, the assets, can you? And actually handing free money to criminal gangs. Because you know what happens if you start doing that? Then they start coming back for more. Maybe I should travel to France, says Lewis. Hop on a boat, come back, and I'll be sorted for life. Free accommodation and benefits. What's not to love? Absolutely right. And I've got a great one here, a picture which is coming from Ian, attached to a picture of Rhoda the Skoda, proudly displaying her common sense sticker, and that's Ian in Oldham. We've already spotted somebody with the common sense sticker in Wigan this morning. If you see somebody driving around with a bumper sticker that says you're the home of common sense, you know you're all part of the revolution of common sense. And we've got more bumper stickers going out. I know some of you are still waiting for the bumper stickers you requested. We've got another batch of them going out very soon, so keep your eyes on the post and hopefully you'll get what it is that you're waiting for. Let's go to the phones though. Tony is in West Sussex. Tony, very good morning to you.
Morning, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, sir. You want to talk about net zero?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, go on.
We have a 1% to achieve to get to zero.
Yeah.
That means we've got 99% right.
Yeah.
Now, if you pass an exam with 99%, who cares whether you've got 100%?
True.
You passed.
Yes.
And if the people behind you have only got 50 or 60%, it's their problem to catch up.
Yes.
So we have 99% efficiency, yeah? For God's sake, that's enough. Stop taxing the people.
Yeah.
It's all wrong.
It's all wrong, and it's also all completely and utterly ill thought out. It's all based on what I regard as made up facts. There are no facts that tell us that if we ever got to net zero, it would make any difference anyway.
No, it won't make any difference. When you've got 99% of something right, the other 1% really doesn't matter.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Thank you very much indeed. Tony in West Sussex there. Harry Cole's going to be on the show a little bit later on because, of course, he's got the piece in the paper this morning, an exclusive. The rush to net zero risks wiping 10% off economic growth by the end of the decade and triggering a financial crash. And this is government's own documentation, right? This is a Whitehall report which has been leaked to The Sun. Basically, the UK's national debt would rocket as its anemic economy would be shunned by investors and the poorest in society would be forced to carry the burden. So we're going to be talking about all of this. You know, the idea that somehow Ed Miliband shoots off to China to see whether he can convince them to get involved in more of our renewable projects and make some more wind farm for us and make some more solar panels for us. I mean, the whole idea of it is nonsensical. Completely and utterly mad. Here's one from Eric who says, Mike, isn't it simple? If they are illegal, then pass a law that they can't apply for benefits. Well, yeah, but this is the problem, right? They are illegal. No question that they're illegal. They can't apply for benefits when they arrive, but what they can do is be given free stuff. So they get a free hotel room, they get free food, they get a subsistence allowance of something like £25 to £30 a day that they can spend on, incidentals. They get free meals, right? So they don't have to pay out any money. That's the same as having benefits, isn't it? So they're already in receipt of benefits, and then when they apply for asylum and they achieve asylum, then they can stay here and they get the right to remain, and then they can claim benefits, because basically at the end of the day, they don't have the ability to get a job straight away. Many of them are not even able to speak English. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Morning, Mike. It's Chris in Northants here, enjoying the show. So the French want some more fishing rights and more boats in our waters, do they, for the defence? Well, here's a thought. Yeah, you can bring some fishing boats into our waters, but when you return, you have to take back that day's small boat crossings.
Yeah, just bring a bigger net, right? And you can get the fish on the one hand over here, and then just throw the net over the others and put them back in the boat, put them in the hold or something with the fish. That would upset them, wouldn't it? Be really stinky. Mark in Selby says, morning, Mike. Can we fit a GPS tracker to Lindsay Hoyle so we can know where he is at any given moment? That's a great idea. Spending our taxes freely. I'm sure after Prime Minister's questions yesterday, he changed into a Hawaiian shirt, Bermuda shorts, and hailed a taxi to Heathrow. This cannot continue. He looks like he's had a couple of sleepless nights. Yeah, I mean, apparently he's not happy as old Lindsay Hoyle. He doesn't like being criticised because he's used to being sort of worshipped like the man who would be king. Because he is king, effectively, of the parliamentary estate. You might remember just the other day, even Richard Tice was too frightened to criticise him, because he basically says, if you criticise him, he'll never let you speak again. He'll never let you have any permission to put a question. He'll never call on you to speak during Prime Minister's questions. He'll never allow any of your private members' bills to be read out. And you'll get no private parliamentary time at all. Well, that doesn't seem like a very good system at all, does it? It sounds feudal. It sounds like he thinks he's Julius Caesar. Well, he isn't. And he doesn't want to spend £7 million of my money either on a new marble bathroom. Thanks very much indeed. 0344 499 1000. Paul in Fife says, Gareth Southgate epitomises the honours system in this country, knighted for winning zero and promoting wokeness. It's pretty unbelievable. It's true. Gareth Southgate, the chin-stroking, bearded manager, formerly of England, who never won anything and who is now a sir, he got knighted for that, and there are now people actually standing around seriously listening to what he's got to say about young men and their troubles and travails. Well, maybe they need role models, but he's certainly not one of them. This is Talk.
In the end of the day, it will be only for Ukraine, for Ukrainian parliament and Ukrainian people to decide what conditions are acceptable for us. But we will never ever agree on any surrender. We will never ever agree that Putin will decide about Ukrainian future. And we want to repeat to Trump and to all of our allies in Europe and especially in NATO that it is wrong that Moscow is taking decision about the future of NATO, but not Brussels.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:21. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. One from Margaret, currently in Tunisia. I've given up watching PMQs. It's become very juvenile trying to score points. The Prime Minister is never challenged by the Speaker to answer the questions. And one from Stu in Hales Owen. I bet the Economist, who is obviously not an economist, is going to double down on the rubbish budget in her emergency budget and heap even more of her economic genius on us. Yeah, I mean, that's the worry, isn't it? The fear that Rachel Reeves continually thinks that she's doing the right thing and continues down the path of sort of self-destruction of our economy. It's absolutely hopeless, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from John.
Morning, Mike. John here in Derbyshire. Got my Home of Common Sense sticker, thank you. Mike, I can't watch Prime Minister's questions anymore. He's standing up saying, on repeat, 22 million black hole. And more so, worse than that, really, is how bad is Kemi? She's just weak, lacks statesmanship, lacks leadership, and he just eats her alive. It's just a joke. We really need somebody that's really going to get into him.
somebody really should, because it surely can't be that difficult. Let's talk to Ryan Saby, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, of course. Ryan, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, it is quite surprising, isn't it, that Kemi Badenoch... It's not as if she's terrible. She's not dreadful, but she sort of doesn't seem to land that many punches on Starmer. He looks quite relaxed when he's answering her.
Yeah, I think speaking to senior Tories this week, I think there has been there was certainly some concern when she started out. They think that she's actually improved in recent weeks. And I have to say, I thought that Kemi Badenoch yesterday, it was one of her better performances at the dispatch box taking on Sir Keir Starmer. I thought she was very, very focused on her questions, talking about the economy, talking about the jobs tax, that national insurance rise, and particularly picking out a key subject, which is whether hospices and care centres would actually get that exemption from that national insurance rise. So I think she honed in on that, and also she got a non-committed answer from Sir Keir on whether income tax, the thresholds wouldn't be extended, which would mean a tax rise. So I actually think she did okay yesterday, but I take your point. In the main, there has been some grumblings around her performance, just not getting to the point, just not attacking Sir Keir when he's been very vulnerable, especially in that early part of his premiership.
Well, exactly right. And given that some people in his own party are actually now being more critical of him, perhaps than even you hear the Tories being. You know, we've got The Guardian this morning talking about the biggest, cut back in public services and public sort of spending since austerity under George Osborne and David Cameron. You'd think she might have gone on something like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think this week, next week, all we're going to be talking about from the weekend onwards is going to be this spring statement. Where is Rachel Reeves going to look to find those big savings to try and balance the books? Now, they've tried to start that this week with the £5 billion worth of welfare savings. But that really, let's be honest, is a bit of a drop in the ocean. So one thing that she'll be asking all her cabinet colleagues, the civil servants across Whitehall, is to try and find those savings. And as we hear, those Whitehall departments are going to try and have to find another 5%, 7% of cuts just to try and balance the books, because she's got those strict fiscal rules that she wants to stick to. And we're going to have to wait and see to find out how much room for manoeuvre, how much financial wriggle room has she got when she delivers that spring statement next week and she gets that independent forecast back.
Yeah, not much wiggle room, I think, would be the answer to that. Meanwhile, today, Keir Starmer's gone off to Scotland to go and visit HMS Vanguard, one of the UK's 10, I think, nuclear-armed submarines off the coast of Scotland. Is that Keir Starmer attempting to look Thatcher-like? Do you remember when she popped her head out of that tank and everyone thought, now that's a proper leader? I'm not quite sure he's got the same effect there.
Yeah, no, this is a sort of tease up a big moment for Sir Keir this afternoon when military chiefs are meeting in London to discuss the so-called the backstop or the security arrangements within Europe. So what Sir Keir is trying to do is try and send that signal to Vladimir Putin that Britain is a big player on the world stage, particularly when it comes to that nuclear deterrent. So I think that is all about signalling ahead of this big meeting this afternoon, where we're going to get the coalition of the willing. And I think the interesting thing on that is let's see which countries, whether they're NATO countries, whether it's Australia, whether it's Canada, what they're actually going to offer the coalition of the willing. Because at the moment, we've not had any firm commitments. We've had lots of interest, but actually, what will they deliver when it comes to trying to maintain and keep peace in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a retired general this morning from America, and he was saying, it's not that clear what they're a coalition of the willing to do. What are they willing to do?
Well, this is the big question for Sir Keir Starmer. This is what he's got to try and do. Now, it seems like Britain and France are going to be playing that leading role and actually trying to have some troops within Ukraine. But on the other hand of that, you've got Vladimir Putin, who says there is no way I will accept a peace deal if you have those peacekeeping troops, if you have any other troops, NATO troops in Ukraine. So this is it, like Sir Keir Starmer, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Volodymyr Zelensky. They're all playing this game of three-dimensional chess, trying to get the pieces in the right parts and hoping that they can find some sort of deal. Now, I'm not sure Vladimir Putin is on the same page as what we are, but let's just let's just try and see where the negotiations across the board take us in the coming days and weeks.
Absolutely right. We're going to talk to Harry Cole, your colleague, coming up a bit later in the show, but let's talk about his story in The Sun this morning. The rush to net zero risks wiping 10% off economic growth by the end of the decade and triggering a financial crash. This is a government paper that's been leaked to The Sun. Quite damaging stuff, really, for the net zero brigade, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And we've heard so much about net zero. We've had Ed Miliband on his big crusade, all those things that he's trying to achieve 2030, that decarbonisation of the electricity grid that most people say that is absolutely bonkers. But Harry makes the point in that story that this is just going to effectively bankrupt us. We haven't quite realised the extent of how bad net zero is going to actually affect us all. And I think this just takes us, just shines a light on the big issue, not only for the politicians of the problems they've got to solve, but how it will actually affect households and hit them in the pocket.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just one other story that's in The Sun today I wanted to mention to you is Gareth Southgate, who was given the Dimbleby lecture to deliver yesterday. And obviously the timing of it was interesting, given that the sentencing of that triple killer in Luton was also taking place as well. People are talking an awful lot about, young men in this country and what they might need and what sort of role models they should be looking up to. It's kind of one of those stories that sort of comes around every now and again. But Gareth Southgate being taken sort of seriously as a sort of a pundit, not just on football, but on life, is a bit of an unusual turn for him, isn't it?
Yeah, no, particularly. And I think what's really interesting, when Gareth Southgate left his role as England manager, he made a point that actually his next big job may not actually be in football management. It may not be in football. And I think one thing, just reading between the lines and seeing him giving this lecture over the last couple of days, you just wonder whether he sees himself as a social justice campaigner, someone who can tap into something, someone who's been through and seen these big role models and find out what actually role they can play when it comes to younger kids who are really, really struggling. When I watched the lecture last night, and the big problems of social media, not having any role models. There was a story in the paper over the weekend on the lack of teachers, male teachers in secondary schools and primary schools, and it just makes you wonder who they look up to.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Ryan, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Ryan Saby, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun there, talking about a couple of the big stories in the paper this morning, including that one on net zero, crashing the economy. Well, we could have told them that. In fact, we did tell them that. We've been saying it for a very long time. Fiona says this, Mike, when was illegal migrants last mentioned on PMQs? It's the only biggest cost financially and safety to the British people. It's an absolute joke. And one from Steve in Leicester, who says, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the first things the migrants would get is a Vote Labour sticker slapped on them as soon as they get off one of the boats. And one from Adi in Adlington says, it's the spring equinox at 9:01 a.m. today, not solstice, which is a completely different occurrence, just saying. OK, Adi, thank you very much indeed for pointing that out. So it's the spring equinox, apparently. I suppose there isn't really a spring solstice. There's a summer solstice, which I think is in June the 21st, or there or thereabouts. But today is March the 20th. It's going to be the hottest day of the year. I've been saying, get your sausages out, get the barbecue out.
The return of the sausages.
People will be wearing shorts and T-shirts. You'll see it, because people love it in this country, don't they? As soon as the sun comes out, all the clothes come off, and everybody seems to bask around like it's, there's nothing to do. Can you imagine Friday? Well, that's going to be like, nobody comes to work already. If it's going to be nice tomorrow, there'll be like a ghost town in London. There'll be nobody here at all. It's 8:31.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:32. I'm Mike Graham. One on the net zero brigade. This drive for net zero is like trying to combat noise pollution by sitting silently in your tent at Glastonbury. The real truth is that net zero is a tax device. What better way than telling the country the world is coming to an end, so they want to pay more tax? And here's one from Andy in Thatcham. Mike, these illegal immigrants aren't paying thousands to get here. They are being trafficked. It's slavery. Why can't we discuss this? There is no way these people have thousands to pay after spending thousands to get across the Med or get through Europe. Well, I think the point is, Andy, some of them do. Some of them do collect the money. I mean, we had a migrant case the other day, didn't we? The guy who came here from Gaza, who was hoping to stay, even though he was basically a terrorist, and he was filmed carrying guns and all sorts back in Gaza, and then he was filming himself arriving. He's now been deported, supposedly. But he explained that he had actually worked his way across Europe and saved up enough money, which is why he was clearly not fleeing a war zone, because he had a job in Germany where he saved up enough money to give some trafficker 1,500 quid or so to cross the channel. Some of them, I agree, are definitely coming here and are being sort of basically indebted into a system of slavery where they have to pay back whatever it is the money is that they supposedly owe the traffickers. And so it's not a very happy situation anyway, all round. But yeah, there's definitely money changing hands, because that's how the traffickers are getting paid. That's how they're making millions every single week, because of the fact that there's so much money involved. Let's get a voice note from Patrick.
Hi, Mike. It's Patrick in East Yorkshire. This gender rubbish of being identifying as what you want. You can go into what prison you want. You can go in what toilet you want. I'm sorry, but this is an absolute attack, and it's an attack on females' rights.
Well, it certainly is, not just on females' rights, but certainly that's a very important part of it. Kate Barker's here. She's the CEO of the LGB Alliance. Let's find out what she makes of it. Kate, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Thanks for talking to us. Two versions of this story in the papers today, really. The Mail's got biological sex erased from official data, which seems to be entirely wrong. And then the Telegraph's got the fact that criminals are free to pick their own gender because the government is refusing to force police to record biological sex. And even now, even after having all this pointed out to them, the government is still going to stick to their guns, I think.
It seems crazy, doesn't it? I mean, the point of a court case surely is truth, finding the truth. So if you're going to kick off proceedings with an obvious lie, right, it seems absolutely an absurd way to start. And it does contribute to the degradation of data that we see across all of our institutions. So it is across, the court, it's across the NHS, and it has some real world consequences. For example, to sort of think one of these things through, if you were a man and you were in court accused of sexually assaulting a child, and you said, well, I want to be recorded as a woman, and that went into official statistics, in a few years we'd look at the data and say, oh look, men are no more likely to offend than women, and predators would use that to say, well, look, it's clearly that men and women offend at the same rate, so there should be no limits on men sleeping with groups of girls on a Girl Guides trip or on a kids club camping trip. It's a kind of a smoke screen that predators use to hide behind in order to be predatory. So it's got real world consequences. And for us, the erasure of the reality of sex with this kind of magical ectoplasm of gender has a lot of impacts on lesbians, gay men and bisexuals. It's a really huge deal. Because what we see is horrible predatory men who like to claim that they are lesbians being emboldened to do so and to force themselves into lesbian social groups and lesbian support groups, because the notion that feeling like something supersedes the biological reality of actually being something is being supported and endorsed by decisions like today and by what's happening in the courts.
It's a kind of insanity, really, isn't it? I mean, it's asking people to believe something which is demonstrably not true.
Yes, and it's quite difficult to unpick exactly why it's proved so sticky. And it seems to me that there are a lot of people, particularly men, to be honest, who are not terribly affected by all of this, who think, look, where's the harm? What does it matter? if a man wants to call himself she, then why can't we all just be nice and go along with it? Because they're not at the sharp end of what's happening. You know, they're unlikely to find themselves as a woman in a prison cell with a man.
Yeah.
But the consequences aren't just in the courts. As I say, they're in the NHS as well. And what we're seeing is people are missing really important appointments because they've decided to report that they are the opposite gender. So they're not getting called forward for a smear test or for a prostate exam. And people are falling ill as a consequence. So I think this general degradation, this acceptance that fantasy, that the way you feel, that something that's in your head is more important than biological reality and truth, is a really, really difficult one to unpick. And it's interesting that this report that's come out today, so it's the Sullivan report on data and statistics, was actually commissioned by the last government. So it will be very interesting to see as this government inches towards the realisation that sex and gender must be disaggregated.
Yes.
How they respond to that and what their reaction to that is going to be.
Well, this is the thing. It looks as though at the moment, anyway, they're not prepared to change what the status quo is. They don't seem to be prepared to order the data be collected in a different way. And it's affecting the police, it's affecting the NHS, it's affecting all manner of civil service departments as well. And you wonder where this kind of stuff comes from. I mean, who would have ordered that this would be done?
Well, we see that in the report it shows that it was about in 1990 when things started to go south a bit. And up until that point, sex and gender were really used interchangeably. And most of us, when we said gender, really we meant sex. Right. But that lack of clarity, some people use that as an opportunity to push forward an agenda which suited them. And the confusion that's arisen now is absolutely endemic, and it's running through all of our institutions. The recommendations on this report are really good and really sensible, and they say we must always record sex in every instance, and if you want to also record somebody's gender identity, whether they think they're non-binary or gender fluid or whatever, that's absolutely fine as well, because it is useful to keep statistics on trans identities and identities which
as long as it's additional,
that's fine. But you must. But sex must be the measure, and sex must be collected in all things. So it'd be hard to understand if the government doesn't do this.
Yes.
Why? There's no downside for anybody.
No, exactly. And I mean, we get the impression sometimes from looking around us and seeing what sort of adverts are changing, and the fact that many private sector companies, rather, I should say, are kind of slightly rowing back on a lot of this, DEI type policy. There's no evidence that that's happening in the public sector. The public sector seems to be as bad as it ever was.
A lot of people, it's their job. They've trained for it for a long time. They make a lot of money out of it, whether they're a consultant or whether they're embedded actually within an institution. So they're an EDI professional, they're a diversity and inclusion or HR, and their mortgage depends on it, really. So it's going to be fairly difficult to weed it out. But I think there has to be an intent shown from the top, a recognition that sex is important in almost every case. And two things can be true. It can be true that sex is important, but it's also to look at people with trans identities and different kinds of identities and measure them too. But those two things should run in parallel. One must not, that gender, which is an idea about how you feel about yourself in your head, can never be more important than the biological reality that we all live with.
No, sure. And I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day. It was a psychiatrist who does some work with sort of trans offenders, if you like. And an awful lot of them, as she was saying, are actually in, shall we say, prisons that they shouldn't be in for a deliberate reason, that they want to be there, that they want to be amongst women because they're predators.
If you gave people the opportunity, I mean, Mike, if you were accused of a horrible crime, a horrible sex crime, which I'm sure will never happen, and you were able to simply say, and you knew you were facing a long stretch, you were able to simply say, I'm a woman, and you know then you'd go into a women's prison, which is you'd be much less likely to be attacked. The conditions are better, they're much smaller, there's more opportunities for education. The question isn't, would you do it? The question is, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You know, there's every incentive there to do it. So I know we've seen statistics which show that a really high proportion of trans-identifying males in prisons are sex offenders.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, does being trans make you more likely to be a sex offender? I think that's unlikely. Or are men gaming the system in order to advantage themselves? Now, one of those two things is true. I don't think the first one is true.
Yeah.
I think the second one seems much more likely. So giving people the opportunity to game the system, given that they're already criminals, it's really hard to understand why anybody would choose to do that and why the government wants to perpetuate it, particularly as it's enormously unpopular within the electorate. I don't know if you saw the recent YouGov poll, which was changing attitudes to trans-identified people, or trans rules, I suppose, and it showed that the vast majority of people across every demographic don't want to see men in women's toilets. They don't want to see men in women's prison and men in women's sports. And it's an absolutely reasonable mainstream point of view. The government needs to get on board with that and recognise that sensible people who do care about other people and their identities and don't want to see anybody disadvantaged, but they want to see women's rights and gay rights protected as is proper.
Yes, of course. And why, just one final thing, why do you think judges are so keen to kind of go along with this type of thing?
I think it's because they're drawn from a particular demographic who are unlikely to have been disadvantaged by this in the past. But I also think they're lagging behind the evidence. And actually, there's a Supreme Court case coming up where LGB Alliance is an intervener in that, where the meaning of the difference between sex and gender is really going to be tested. And I think there'll be, if that's successful, I think there'll be huge changes across the judiciary to the benefit of all.
Yeah, let's hope so. Kate, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Kate Parker, the CEO of the LGB Alliance. Let's get a couple of your messages in. Fred says this. Mike, Fred in Surrey here. Equinox is when the sun is directly above the equator. Solstice is when the sun is furthest north or south of the equator. Well, now you know. And on the topic of role models, says Carl, and people in the UK not having one, why are people so fast to forget about Jesus Christ, especially considering we're a Christian country, but don't want to look to the person who started the faith? The only shined man who ever lived, the only sinless man who ever lived. Saying we have no role models these days is a flat-out lie. Well, I mean, I suppose some people might say that they could have a religious figure as a role model. But, you know, I suppose part of the argument is that a realistic role model to have for somebody who's trying to live a life during the times that we are now alive, if you like. You know, because it's a bit different then. Let's get a voice note from Luke.
Morning, Mike. Great show, as always. Just with regards to the illegal immigrants, I don't understand why we can't just stop subsidising them, putting them in the hotels and giving them food. I don't think they would arrive or continue to come should that be the case. Yeah, anyway, have a great day.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Luke. And Pete in North Wales says, Mike, great show. So the main reason given to us for high energy prices is the war in Ukraine. So if we get peace, surely we will get lower energy bills. Not. Well, you don't think you would, really? I'm just so cynical. This is the thing. Prices always go up. They don't come down, do they? We had inflation of 11%, and then we were told, don't worry, it's not going to stay that high. And it came back down again to sort of 4%. Then it came back down to 3%. And now it's currently running at around 2-point-something%. But nothing's gone down in price, has it? The prices stay the same. And you just get stooped once again, I'm afraid. Welcome to modern Britain. Coming up, we've got lots more to do. We'll take more of your calls, of course, as well. This is Morning Glory, the home of common sense. Earlier on in the show, we showed you what Angela Raina had been up to, because not content with allowing everybody else to fly around the world at our expense. You know, we've got Jonathan Reynolds, the fake solicitor. He's over in Washington, D.C. at the moment, talking to the Americans about tariffs and talking to the Americans about business deals and trade deals that we could do. Angela Raina decided to disappear off to Ethiopia for a bit.
It's been
incredible experience coming to Ethiopia to see the work that the UK is doing here, whether that's the humanitarian work, but also the collaboration on growth and opportunities for trade. The UK is committed to working with Ethiopia in conflict resolution and humanitarian need. I visited some of the work that we're doing, the outreach for education and healthcare, but also the work that we've been doing in helping businesses grow and the UK economy to work with the Ethiopian economy. I also met with the Prime Minister, and it was fantastic to hear his aspirations for Ethiopia's future, to have a thriving economy and for our two countries to work together. It was great to visit Ethiopia's stock exchange and learn more about how it's unlocking Ethiopia's potential. We've got a strong relationship, which hopefully we will build on to deliver jobs for Ethiopia and the UK. It's incredibly important that the UK continues to work with Ethiopia because of our ties, and that we can do so much good together to improve the standards of living for both people here in the UK and Ethiopia.
What's the big thing about Ethiopia suddenly? Oh, suddenly we better go check out the job situation in Ethiopia. Oh, how about a look at the Ethiopian Stock Exchange? Why? What's she doing there? It cost 20,000 quid apparently to go, and she made a video. That's the video we just watched. And until it was outed by Guido Fawkes as a ridiculous sort of vanity project, she'd only had 50 views of the video. So it wasn't exactly breaking down any barriers. And I mean, if there's jobs being created in Ethiopia, maybe she could create a few here. This is where the jobs are needed, right? I don't remember anybody from Ethiopia coming here and saying, I've fled Ethiopia, so now I need asylum, because that's what they're saying that actually the jobs and the situation in Ethiopia is great. Nothing to worry about. You know, Ethiopia's a fine place. It may well be. But what's Raina doing there? What's it going to do with her? I don't understand. She's the housing minister and the deputy prime minister. She's got nothing to do with the Foreign Office. She's got nothing to do with, you know, the rebuilding of Ethiopia office, if there is one. I don't know what's going on. What's it all about? Jane says this, Graham, it's very harsh, there is only two genders, male and female only. Well, I know that. You not tell me something I didn't know. I never said there was more than two genders. I mean, some people think there's 72 genders, but I'm not one of them. Morning, Mike, says Dave. We suffer from previous years of the promotion of non-competitiveness in schools when everyone should be celebrated as a winner for taking part. The problem with that is we haven't taught recent generations how to lose, to learn from failure and to get up and keep trying. Is it any wonder then that many young people choose not to try, to take the easy way out and live off the rest of us, made even easier by a soft and gullible welfare system that pays out our money without question? And Dave's in South Gloucestershire. You're absolutely right. You know, making Gareth Southgate the sort of the pillar of common sense and making him the sort of the totem of advice for young men, I just don't think he's a very good role model. He hasn't won anything. He's a football manager who hasn't won anything. He wasn't a particularly great footballer. He was all right. He played for England. He's famous for missing a penalty. But, you know, seriously? This from Rob. He says, I'm Robert. I'm a Brit. I just turned 80 living abroad but taxed in the UK. I worked there for 42 years and claim nothing. I watch all of your discussions on YouTube. I'm so angry with what is happening there. I could rant endlessly to you, so I just yell at the TV. Anyway, as the armed forces are so depleted, why not bring back national service and make men out of many of the thugs? Well, you know, it's not a bad idea, to be honest. It would certainly give people a sense of belonging, and it would certainly give people a role model as well, if they were young people that needed such a thing. Probably not a bad time to do it either, now that we're supposedly rattling a sabre towards Russia, and now Keir Starmer wants to have troops on the ground that he wants to commit to. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Good morning, Mike. Raina is busy in Ethiopia helping that bloody country. How about her saying in her own country and sorting the bloody mess out here that the Labour government have created, says Sharon from Staffordshire. Very well said. Very well said indeed. We've got lots more to do. This is Morning Glory. Of course, Duncan Clark is going to join us to talk about the state of our nation. You might remember last week we were kicking off about the terrible, terrible plight of our streets and the rubbish that flies around, the litter. We're going to get Duncan Clark to tell us what he's got to do about it.
was a big round. I think the Tories gave judges the power to do.
So why they're not using it?
Well, some of them don't think it's. Some of them, some of them are, doing 10 cases a week. So there is definitely. I totally agree with you, especially for if you're found guilty, you've been callous enough to push it to a trial. If you actually, very obviously, you did it, and then at the last minute, that one moment, the victims, the family, the public can get that sort of moment of justice. To deny them that, I mean, you're right.
I mean.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the Morning Glory. It's 8:54. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of Common Sense, the one place where you go to where the nation comes to talk. Got a breaking news for you, sad breaking news. Eddie Jordan has died at the age of 76. He was a Formula One boss. He was a legend, really, of the racing world, and he was a very, very entertaining character. He's passed away after battling bladder and prostate cancer. Very, very aggressive forms of cancer, which unfortunately have made him succumb to them. He's died at the age of 76. Let's talk to Duncan Clark, though. He's the founder of a company called Let's Talk Trash, because, of course, we found ourselves talking about trash an awful lot last week, because, quite frankly, apropos of nothing in particular, fly tipping is on the rise. People are dumping stuff by the side of the road. People are leaving things outside their houses. The state of our streets is getting worse and worse and worse when it comes to litter. And Duncan, of course, is the founder of this Let's Talk Trash. He owns Brexted Park as well. And he's the cheerleader, it says here, for Essex on littering. Duncan, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, I was quite appalled when we asked people to send in pictures of what their sort of neighbourhoods looked like around the country, and they were really awful. The kind of litter that you never used to see piled up high in places where it looked like the litter, the bin men were on strike.
Yeah, well, last week you had John Reid on. He's a wonderful bloke, John. Clear Up Britain. We should all get behind his campaign. And I really commend you guys for picking this up, the Talk campaign. Well done, you. I sent in a picture of a slip road off the A12 into my local town, Whittam. And honestly, it is mind-blowing. John talked about behavioural change. We have got to tackle behavioural change from the top down and the bottom up. Top down. That picture that I sent in, I do not know how the person who is being paid to keep that slip road clean can look himself in the mirror. And, he's being paid a lot of, or she is being paid a lot of money to clean that thing up, and probably our money. And it's been like that for a couple of years. So they clearly are not doing their job. And where are our local leaders who should be, why are they indulging it? Because when you look at that stuff, it's screaming out at you that, it's okay to be selfish. It's okay not to have any personal responsibility. It's okay not to have any civic pride or community spirit. And so when you tell me that you don't have the money to do it and it's low on your priorities, I say to you, listen, all the problems that you have, the common denominator is those three things, lack of responsibility, selfishness, lack of civic pride. And if you had a magic wand and could get rid of it overnight, guess what? Not only would you save the direct costs, but you'd find that you'd save a lot of indirect costs of antisocial behaviour. So don't try and sort those problems out while at the same time you're leaving us living in filth, and it's deplorable. And someone needs to get a grip. I just don't understand why they don't reprioritize it. So what we're trying to do is, that's a top-down approach. Right. The bottom-up approach is to tackle the young in Essex, particularly in my district, Malden. And we've started something called the Let's Talk Trash Festival here at Brexted. And our aim is to try and reprioritize litter in the young. I don't know if you recall, but do you remember the sort of overnight revolution that happened when drink driving became socially totally unacceptable amongst the young? And that was a brilliant bit of marketing by the government. Why are the same kids that are so responsible that way chucking stuff out of the windows onto the country roads.
Yes.
So what we try and do when they come to us is to inculcate them with a sense of civic pride, how the sense of community, sense of personal responsibility. And when we had 300 kids here a couple of years ago from the Plume Academy to talk, let's talk trash, then, you know, they left as little ambassadors. And what we need to do, these are the voters of tomorrow. If the politicians aren't interested in letter, these people will be, hopefully, in a generation. And that's what we try and do. Our next one is in September. Instead of having one school with 300 kids, we're trying to get maybe 5 schools with 60 kids, and then the following year, 10 schools with 30 kids. And then we go from Malden to Braintree to Colchester, and then the whole of Essex. And then maybe we infect Suffolk.
Yes. Well, that's obviously the way to do it. It's great. We'll have to talk some more. Let's keep in touch, Duncan, because we're out of time right now, but we will form an alliance of one kind or another and make this happen, because it needs to happen. Britain needs to be tidied up. Britain needs to get rid of the trash. It's that simple. This is Talk.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. We are, ladies and gentlemen, in the spring equinox, I believe. I think we've been corrected to say it's not the solstice, it's the equinox, which means something about the sun being further away than it was. I don't know. I can't explain it. I'm not a scientist. I don't pretend to be one. You can, I'm sure, correct me. Coming up in this hour, Harry Cole's going to join us from The Sun. They've got an exclusive this morning about the net zero dash to crash the economy, because basically this is an internal government report which has been leaked to The Sun. The rush to net zero risks wiping 10% of economic growth by the end of the decade. And that will be added to the 10% of economic growth that they started wiping off in the middle of the decade, because things are not going well. Things are going from bad to worse for Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. He's been off visiting submarines this morning, almost as if he's playing military generals, because a load of military generals, of course, meeting up in London today, a coalition of the willing, to work out what exactly they are willing to do. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has told Donald Trump that, yeah, it's all very well having a peace deal, but I'm not agreeing to it unless these various different things are going to be adhered to, which of course means that he's kind of holding all the cards here. Volodymyr Zelensky doesn't have very many. He had a conversation with Donald Trump yesterday. We've been talking about a great many things this morning, including the disappearance, basically, of all references to sex and gender in various pieces of data collected by the NHS, the military and the police, which seems to me to be a very, very stupid idea indeed. Tim Montgomery's going to join us as well, founder of Conservative Home, and we're going to be talking too about all manner of things, including the return of the Tour de France to the United Kingdom, which I can't say I'm particularly keen on, and also a man who was buried in a coffin shaped like a Snickers bar. I don't know why we're doing that story, but it just seems to me a bit odd. Very odd indeed. 0344 499 1000. Oh yeah, the French are doing a guide to what to do when you get invaded. Presumably surrender, right? Let's have a voice montage of what you've been saying this morning.
Well, I get up at 5 o'clock. I'm going to be home at 6 o'clock tonight. Work my arse off. Well, I don't get no thanks.
Good news, mate. I've just seen another Mike Graham's Morning Glory bumper sticker in Standish, near Wigan.
I've been watching Dan Hodges. What's happened? He's had an epiphany. Is it because it's the spring? Who knows?
I can go to work feeling relatively happy this morning that we're all on the same page, that this government are absolutely rubbish.
Absolutely right. Here's a strange one from Stuart. He says, Mike, if there are only two genders, what about Kevin O'Sullivan? I don't know what that means. Maybe he can explain. 0344 499 1000. He'll be on at 7 o'clock tonight, of course. Harry Cole is coming up on Drive today as well. We'll be talking about all of that. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Word on the street is that our Ange is in Ethiopia to get some tips on how to grow an economy, says Neil. Well, that's a very good point. Let's talk to Ben, who's in Essex. He wants to talk about that as well. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to hear from you. What can you tell me?
Yeah, that video of Raina virtue signalling about Ethiopia made my blood boil.
I know. Mad, isn't it?
I mean, the thing is, well, I think it's a noble thing, and I've got no problem with, wanting to help countries out and things like that. And I've not got no problem with Ethiopia, but let's sort our country out first.
Mm.
We've got a dying economy. We've got problems with the border.
Yeah.
We've got all sorts of this going on. We should sort our country out first before
we've got millions of people needing jobs, not working. Yeah. She's going off to make jobs available in Ethiopia.
It's crazy. I'm not knocking Ethiopian people, and I'm sure they're very lovely, but it makes my blood boil that they're doing that. Why aren't we prioritising us? I just think it's a joke. And when I see these videos of them all pandering and we're so great, we're doing this, it just annoys me.
Yeah.
She should be talking about us, not pandering to another country. And it is taking the mickey out of the British people.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Ben, great call. Thank you very much indeed. We've had 2 calls already this morning from people saying that, we get up really early in the morning, middle of the night. One guy said he got up at 3, another guy got up at 5, working, really, really working hard, sometimes doing more than one job, paying taxes, doing all the right things, and they're just getting the mickey taken out of them by a government that doesn't seem to care about people who actually contribute to the economy. They seem to prefer to give things away to those who don't contribute to the economy. But let's talk to Harry Cole, policy editor at The Sun. He's doing drive time this afternoon as well at 4 o'clock. Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are we doing?
Very well indeed. Great story this morning. Net zero is going to crash the economy. I mean, we've been saying this for some time. This is now the government's own confirmation.
Well, that's the thing. They talk a good game. Last night, the government was saying they didn't deny that this was their own internal assessment of the economic impact of net zero, and it's pretty alarming. It said it could wipe off 10% of GDP by the end of the decade in a bad scenario. There's quite a sort of chilling warning of what could actually lead to a global financial crisis, the sort we saw in sort of 2008. If it isn't handled properly, it says because there's so many assets around the world that large firms have, everything from oil rigs to power stations to even aeroplanes that won't be able to take the new sort of net zero style aviation fuel, because all these assets are floating around and the targets for climate change keep getting harder and changing quicker.
Yeah.
Companies that are expecting to be able to use these assets for 20, 30, 40 years and still have that shelf life will suddenly have to basically kiss goodbye to that investment that they've already spent and take the stuff out of service. Now, no one really knows quite how much of the kit essentially is out there that's actually essentially going to be useless in the next sort of couple of decades. And because of that, they're warning that the share prices and the share prices of these firms could suddenly drop if they have to admit that actually trillions of pounds of global assets are actually useless, rendered useless by political climate change targets. And should that happen, and that happen quickly and on a grand scale, you can easily see how markets crash. And Britain, with its anemic growth already, its high interest rates, it was coming out the back of a long spell of inflation, is not in any way weathered, uniquely placed to weather such a storm. So, and once again, it admits there in black and white, remarkably, that obviously the poorest in society will be hit the hardest. The people with the lowest incomes are the people that are going to be least able to deal with the fallout of net zero, and actually. The report, it was remarkable. It says there in black and white, it says actually, I mean, the scale of what we're asking people to do essentially perhaps renders it impossible to do because you're just not going to get the public to go along with us.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, it's quite frightening and eye-watering, the figures in here. Analysts from McKinsey had said you might need to set aside something like £1.6 trillion in order to sort of soften the blow of whatever the impact might be. We just don't have that kind of money. We don't, you can't just keep inventing money and printing it out of the printing machine, can you?
There's a really interesting bit of the report. It says, well, how are you going to do this? They say, obviously, public finances are going to take a hit because public spending is going to have to increase. Britain is not going to be able to get the levels of global investment that it needs to offset that. So debt is going to have to go up. We're going to have to borrow some of it. We're going to have to rely on some of it being invested. But obviously, the government's going to have to spend more. And there's a bit in there which says actually, the scale of what we're going to need and the likelihood of being able to get that from the private sector actually means that we wouldn't even be able to borrow the amount of money we need to do it. So where's it going to come from? And this report has been, it was written in November 2023, the business department. It's been sitting in a presumably in a dusty shelf somewhere in Whitehall since then, because I don't think anyone's been reading this stuff. And I appreciate the concerned citizen that made sure it landed in my lap.
Well, it's very good that they
wide audience.
Very good that they did, because now we can all see what's going on. Because I suspect, and you may well suspect the same thing, that nobody really wanted to see this report because they don't want to see the truth. I mean, the whole point of net zero, whenever I ask any politician about net zero, they can't explain to me what it actually will mean if we ever reach it. They never know what will happen next, and all they can do is make these sort of dire warnings about what might happen if we don't do it. And the fact that, temperatures might rise or sea levels might rise, but they don't really know any of that. And they kind of are trying to convince us to give... It's almost like a bank robber saying, give me all your money, I'm going to do good things with it. But you don't really know what they're going to do with it.
Well, it's the report says, look, this is doable. We've just got to be very, very honest about what it actually means and whether it is even possible to do it in the time frame. And we go back to that time in 2019 when Theresa May was desperately scrabbling around for a legacy. Rammed this through Parliament with 90 minutes of debate. The Treasury at the time, Philip Hammond, not a guy I had exactly sort of eye to eye on many
personality.
But he was saying, look, this is a blank check. This is going to cost £1 trillion, and he was sort of browbeaten and told to be quiet because the ousted Prime Minister, who desperate to be remembered for something other than Brexit, and had disastrous attempts to get Brexit done 3 times and failed with her sort of daft Brexit deal, desperately wanted something else to be remembered. And frankly, if even a quarter of it, a sliver of the things in this report were to come to pass, she'll be remembered all right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. So, I mean, where do they go from here? Because, you know, they've got this massive problem coming up. You know, the budget statement, which is going to be made next week by Rachel Reeves, has got nowhere to go, really. There's no good news coming. There's talk in The Guardian this morning of it being the biggest launch of austerity, the biggest launch against public spending since austerity. If the Tories were doing this, there'd be riots in the streets, wouldn't there?
Oh, of course they would. They would be. Imagine the unions, the very same ministers who are now lining up with their scalpels would be in hysterics. No, I suppose that's the way the cookie crumbles. But I mean, what can she do? She can't borrow anymore. She's maxed. The company credit card, so to speak, to use a tedious metaphor, is maxed out. She's already done the 40 billion of tax rates. She can't do any more of that. Could she freeze income tax rates? Maybe. She said she made a big song and dance about unfreezing them in 2028. I wonder whether maybe she might have another look at that. But I mean, she'd take a big political hit for that, because she made such a big deal of unfreezing it. So where else can you go? It's got to be cuts and squeeze. And you can see all the noise the government's been making the last few weeks, talking about waste and all of this excess spending and government credit cards being frozen. They know there's some fat in the system still, but it's going to be noisy, and the people complaining, ironically, aren't going to be the opposition. They're going to go along with us. Both Reform and the Tories will have supported fiscal conservatism and reducing the size of the state. Their critics are going to be standing behind them. And it's that same thing that hit Boris Johnson. A massive big majority is actually harder to control than a smaller one, because you think, well, we've got such a big majority, I can noise off anyway, and I can complain, and it won't matter because we'll win all the votes anyway. And we saw what happened to Boris with that, didn't we? Yeah,
absolutely right. And one final nod to you. I see that Hancock's back in the news as well. He was up at COVID inquiry yesterday. Reminded us all of that great exclusive of yours way back in the day when he was involved in what used to be called Ugandan discussions in his office with his lover.
Yes, I mean, probably one of the more defining images of that government. Yes, I mean, that COVID inquiry, remarkable, isn't it? They're still going on. They still aren't asking the proper questions. They're still wrangling over tiny bits. And meanwhile, we learn now that actually the whole thing, the CIA Trump's declassified the CIA files. It turns out the British government knew about all along that actually this whole thing came from a Chinese lab after all, despite anyone suggesting that at the time, being called, racist or conspiracy theorists. So I would like as much fun as it is to see Hancock and his hands pop up once again, I'd rather that COVID inquiry actually had a look at how this actually really started, and whether in fact perhaps China owes us trillions of pounds.
Trillions of pounds, absolutely right. Yeah, well, that would be fantastic if we could do that. Harry, great to see you. We'll see you this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Harry Cole there from The Sun, political editor, of course, doing Drive this afternoon, 4 to 7, after Ian Collins from 1, after Julie Hartley-Brewer from 10. We're here for another 45 minutes or so, and we're joined now by Tim Montgomery, who is... we're not joined by Tim Montgomery, sorry, I take that back. We're joined by Kim, who wants to talk about role models.
Morning, Mike. Kim from near Bristol here. Now, I'm currently a sergeant instructor in the Combined Cadet Force, CCF, along with the ACF as well. We see such positive transformation of young people from years 9 to 13. Some do go ahead and join the military. Many others go with transferable skills into other walks of life, though. Now, if we as a nation don't recognise and champion the good work of the uniformed organisations in the UK, if some continue to see anything strong as somehow bad or backwards, we won't have any right to continue as a state, I think, and our values will be in serious jeopardy. More people need to support our uniformed organisations, in my opinion, and they make great men and women out of our young people, I can tell you. I've seen it with my own eyes.
I've seen it with my own eyes as well, Kim. I think you're absolutely right. But we need to have more respect for one another in these difficult times. We need to have more respect for authority figures. But by the same token, those authority figures have to do the right things as well. And I totally agree with you about role models in the armed forces and the uniformed brigades as well. But at the end of the day, our political leaders do not inspire much, shall we say, admiration. Our sporting superstars don't really do that either. And look at the state of the country. Look at the state of the litter. We were just talking about it before the news there. This from Gaz in Pontefract, who says this: Mike, great show. I had the misfortune of driving around the outskirts of Birmingham on Tuesday morning. There was rubbish everywhere, filthy pavements, overflowing bins, strike or no bin strike. You would just take it to the rubbish dump yourself, wouldn't you? I certainly would. No pride whatsoever. And one from Stephen, who says, basically, in London, is it any wonder we have a litter problem? We have an infrastructure built around a population of 60 to 65 million people, and now our population is around 80 to 90 million, if they were honest with us. Well, it could be as high as that. I mean, officially, we're heading towards something like 70, 72 million, aren't we, in a couple of years? But I, like you, think there are probably many more people here than we are being told about. Noel in Stafford says, Mike, Labour's new slogan should read, pay more tax, the illegals need you. Yeah. And Wayne says this, genders and sex. If you owned a zoo and a lion identified as a zebra, would you stick that lion in the zebra's enclosure, risking the zebras on the hope that the lion doesn't return back to its instincts? Well, it's a very good point, and I think the answer is, as you know, of course not. You would not put a lion in with a zebra because the lion would eat the zebra, even if it thought it was a zebra. It's as simple as that. It's coming up to 19 minutes past 9. Lots more going on. Get in touch if you want to get your voices heard. This is the place where the nation comes to talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory.
Was a big round. I think the Tories gave judges the power to do.
So why they're not using it?
Well, some of them think it's. Some of them, some of them are, doing 10 cases a week. So there is definitely. I totally agree with you, especially for if you're found guilty, you've been callous enough to push it to a trial. If you actually, very obviously, you did it, and then at the last minute, that one moment, the victims, the family, the public can get that sort of moment of justice. To deny them that, I mean, yeah, you're right.
I mean,
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:22 with you until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along to tell us what's coming up on her show for the next 3 hours. We've got lots to do. Alan Mendoza's here, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Also Cormac Smith, former Ukraine Foreign Ministry Advisor as well. But before we do any of that, this show is called Morning Glory, right? Now, what does that remind you of? Reminds you of a great Oasis song, doesn't it? If you've never seen Oasis, you should really see them before you shuffle off this mortal coil. And we're going to give you the opportunity to do just that. How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Well done indeed, and good luck with all of that. Let's talk about sunrise this morning, because I put out a picture this morning from the beautiful 17th floor here at News UK HQ, and I've got a new one here from Erith. Mike in Erith, sunrise in Erith. Happy spring. It is the spring equinox after all. Let's talk as well, just before we get talking about Ukraine, about role models, because we've had a few of these conversations. Young white boys, says Chris, need good role models. We're looking at Starmer, Miliband, Streeting and the rest of Labour and most of Parliament. No wonder we promote losers. Gareth Southgate, the former England manager, has been waxing lyrical about this. He was given the Dimbleby lecture last night on TV. Have a look at what he said.
Young men are suffering. They're feeling isolated. They're grappling with their masculinity and with their broader place in society. As real-world communities and mentorship declines, young men end up withdrawing, reluctant to talk or express their emotions. They spend more time online searching for direction and are falling into unhealthy alternatives like gaming, gambling and pornography.
Well, some people don't think Gareth Southgate's the best person to deliver that sort of message because he's not terribly inspiring. And it's all very well to go, we should have courage and we should have, morals and we shouldn't do anything bad. Well, I don't know who he's appealing to with that. Who are you appealing to? I presume he's got some children. He must have known how to talk to them. But that's not how you're going to get young people to look up to you, I'm afraid, Gareth. Anyway, let's talk to Cormac Smith, former Ukraine Foreign Ministry advisor, and Dr. Alan Mendoza. Cormac, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike, on this glorious morning.
Isn't
See
it,
what I did there?
Isn't it lovely? Yes, thank you very much indeed. You're still not getting any free Oasis tickets. I don't care what anybody says. Let me ask you about this before we move on to, young men. I mean, you're looking at a country like Ukraine, which is at war with Russia, a horrible, terrible war, terrible things happening to them. The people seem very resilient there, right? And I'm not sure that if we were in the same situation, we would be as resilient. And I don't know why that is. What do you think?
Mike, when I went out to Ukraine in 2016, I met a lot of young people as well as the senior diplomats and government people that I was working with. And in fact, after a while, I made time for mentoring young diplomats. And it struck me, and I used to say to, nephews back here, you don't know you're born.
Yeah.
In terms of how easy you have it here. You want to go to Ukraine, and this was before this horrible war, but these were people that were growing up in a much harsher reality, and whose parents had grown up under the horrors, and believe it was nothing else, under the horrors of communism under the Soviet Union, and that had been imbued into them. And I think it's that great character, and I was hugely impressed with Ukrainian youth, and I think that we could learn an awful lot of lessons from Ukraine. I mean, I don't want to say too much more. I'm 62. I was blessed to have the most fantastic father and mother. So I mean, I grew up with great role models all around me. But it's a very, very worrying trend. The tendency to toxic masculinity, and it's something that I don't have children myself, but it's something that I'm certainly concerned about. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the situation currently on the ground. Vladimir Zelensky had a conversation with Donald Trump last night, which Trump has described as a good conversation. Putin, up to his old tricks, I suppose, is kind of giving everybody the runaround. Nobody's quite sure whether if he says something, he's going to stick to it, or whether he's going to just completely ignore it as if it never was said. What's your take on where we are right now? Well, we don't really know where we are, Mike, to be honest. We have had some very warm and enthusiastic and diplomatic words coming from both the White House and coming from President Zelensky. But we have absolutely no detail on Putin. I mean, what is on the table is a proposal for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. President Zelensky has already signed up to that. Putin has not. Putin is putting immediately the most extreme conditions which Ukraine will never be able to sign up to. For example, that all military aid and intelligence into Ukraine should cease for the 30 days. Ukraine should not be able to train their soldiers. They should not be able to reorganize their front lines. I wonder, is Russia prepared to stop taking Shahed drones from Iran, artillery shells from North Korea, and the other lethal assistance which we know that they get from China, and of course troops from North Korea. So to be quite honest, I don't think this is going to go anywhere.
Yeah. So you think we'll still be sitting in the same place in about a month's time?
Well, I think whatever deal comes out is going to be a deal that the Ukrainians, both Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian people, simply cannot take. And if I can say, I think there's three problems with Trump and the Trump administration. One, I do not believe that they understand Vladimir Putin and his way of doing business. And they are certainly very, very inexperienced in terms of international diplomacy, and certainly in terms of dealing with Russia. I would say they are simply out of their depth. But there is also, I would say Putin is playing them like a fiddle at the moment.
Yeah.
But there is something about, and President Trump is in thrall with Putin in ways that we can speculate about, but we don't fully understand. And I think, President Trump is in a hurry to get a peace deal done, because what he clearly wants to do, his priority is he wants to normalize relations with Russia. We've heard him talking already about having a hockey match between the two. And certainly from my perspective and the people that I speak to, both senior people over here and in Ukraine and in Kyiv, we don't see this going anywhere.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Cormac Smith there, former Ukraine Foreign Ministry advisor. Let's talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza, who's at the Henry Jackson Society. Alan, would you concur with those views, do you think?
Well, look, I think we are in a very difficult position because, we're uncertain as to the direction of travel. I think it's obvious that in that Trump-Putin call, Donald Trump did not get what he had told us he would be getting. I mean, the US position went backwards, if you think about it. There they were a week before, with Ukraine having signed up to a full 30-day ceasefire across all domains. Now the position's moved back simply to energy infrastructure, which, let's not forget, is a position that helps Russia, because it's the Russians who are actually suffering more from energy infrastructure attacks right now than the Ukrainians. So very strange to have gone backwards. If you're the US, you're the great deal maker in that regard. I mean, obviously there was a very good conversation between President Zelensky and President Trump as well. But it's unclear where all this ends. And I think with European leaders meeting today, in Brussels, the big question remains, what is Europe going to contribute ultimately to any peace? And crucially, attached to that is, will the US be the security backstop for that European component? And will Putin accept it? All these questions are still up in the air, Mike. We're a long way away, I think, from definitively knowing if there's going to be peace in Ukraine this year, despite some mood music suggesting we could be inching towards it.
Oh, quite. And also not very helpful, is it, that the French have decided that with the money they're going to spend on arms, they're not going to buy any arms from British manufacturers on the grounds that we're not in the EU, unless we give them some kind of sweetener on fishing rights, which seems entirely not quite the spirit of the thing at all, does it?
Well, it's not simply not in the spirit of the thing, it's stupid. Because at the end of the day, Europe has woken up in the last few weeks to the reality that Europeans are going to have to work together if they're serious about the continental defence within Europe, and that's going to involve not having these kind of sweetheart deals that the French and others are obsessed with. You're either serious about security or you're not. What the French are telling us with this move is that they're not serious about security, because everyone knows that if you want to have effective continental defence in Europe, you need the British on board. We are, a major military power, and we are essential for that coalition. So the French need to get a rain check on their positioning here, because it suggests they're not actually that serious. And if that's the image President Macron wants to portray, I'm sure the only person who's laughing about it is Vladimir Putin.
Well, exactly right. And when we are in these difficult sort of choppy waters, if you want, diplomatically, and when really serious issues are at stake, I don't really think it's a great idea for Keir Starmer to go swanning about pretending that he's, Captain Sensible of a submarine. He's off to HMS Vanguard today, one of the UK's nuclear-armed submarines, which I'm sure, from his PR point of view, is meant to show some kind of military strength.
Well, I mean, look, I think, the government's trying to make the most of its recent announcements on defence and trying to show there's a, renewed commitment to the nuclear strike force as well. I don't begrudge him that. But I think, the reality is that it's quite obvious that where the government is with its recent announcement of 2.5% is actually already being overtaken by events. So I don't mind, photo ops and submarines, but I'd like a few more submarines. I'd like a few more, naval ships. I'd like a bigger army. I'd like a better air force, because I think Britain needs it to defend itself in the current climate.
Yeah, I think that would be a very good idea indeed. Great to talk to you, Dr. Anna Mendoza. Thank you very much indeed, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Let's get a voice note from John.
John from Suffolk again. Great show. Ethiopia. Ethiopia is Ethiopia's problem. Nigeria is Nigeria's problem. Libya, well, that might be a different case, but basically, these countries are their own problems. Let's go back to nationhoods. Let's go back to what Donald Trump is doing, which is ensuring that business and production comes back to the US rather than outsourcing everything to China and everywhere else. It's time for us to man up, become interested in our own nation, spend our money on our own people in our own country, and other people can do exactly the same. I'm sick and tired of Ethiopia this, and Nigeria that, and Pakistan this. It's none of our business.
It really isn't. John, you speak for an awful lot of people, I would suggest. Bev from Hampshire says this. Great show, thank you. I often find myself laughing out loud on my dog walk. Well, you'll like the next bit we're going to do. My husband and I had a holiday at the end of last year visiting India and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, a small country, has 1.3 million tuk-tuks, most of them two-stroke engines. Goodness knows how many there are in India. And we think we're going to make a difference with our 1% reduction. What a joke. In a global context, we are irrelevant. Mad Miliband is off to China to ask them for more windmills and solar panels. Yeah, when bringing on a new coal plant every single week. It's scary how stupid these ministers really are. It is really scary, actually. It's quite remarkable. Had a great tweet earlier, which I'm going to try and find in the meantime, which is all about how we've got a sort of a government of the least talented. Because I think they used to call it government of all the talents. Well, we haven't got any, I'm afraid. We're fresh out of them. It's 9:35. Coming up, we're going to talk dogs with Malcolm Brabant.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, 9:37 with you until 10 o'clock. How about this from Graham in Bushy? This is what I was looking for earlier. We've got an education secretary who's never taught at a school, a health secretary that's not a doctor or works in the NHS, a business secretary that has never run a business, and the person running our economy who isn't an economist. You forgot about the fake solicitor, though. He's never run a business and he's a fake solicitor. Let's talk to a man, though, who's not a fake anything. Malcolm Brabant, a man I've known for many a year, has done some incredible things in his life. He's now an author of a book called Dog-splaining, and there could be no bigger sort of praise than this from Ken Bruce, right? A broadcaster extraordinaire, who says about this book, Dog-splaining is an indispensable guide to canine thinking and recommended for all humans with animals in their lives. It's inventive, intriguing and hilarious. So, Malcolm, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. Good to see you. So, we've all got, well, not when I say we've all got dogs, many of us have got dogs, and you often wonder what they're thinking. So what can you tell us? How have you managed to get inside the head of the dog?
Well, we've got a 5-year-old golden retriever called Loki, who is, quite frankly, the most expressive sort of animal that we've ever had. Right. And he really has sort of fitted into our sort of home extremely well, and he's kind of adopted our habits. And you know, he's trying to talk to us. I mean, he's not just a dog who barks, but recently he's become incredibly vocal, and he's making all these different sounds. And it's, you know, it's quite, I mean, I speak reasonable golden retriever, so I think I've been able to interpret what he's thinking, which, you know, on many occasions is, "I'm not that bloody insect kibble again, where's my bacon sandwich?" I mean, that's fairly easy. But the whole premise of the book basically is that there was I don't know if you know this, but about a few years ago, there was an American or a Canadian psychiatrist who studied dogs, and he came to the conclusion that golden retrievers had a vocabulary of about 165 words, which is the same as kind of the ability of a 2-year-old child. Now, Loki's attitude to that, of course, is, do you think we're monosyllabic? We're much more educated than that. And so the premise of the book is basically that the dog is a genius, and that he understands human, and basically as he grows up, because his authors or his owners or humans are old news hounds, the television's on all the time, and so he's learning exponentially, and he's becoming incredibly bright, and he develops some very kind of trenchant views.
Interesting. And we've got a couple of clips that we can play in a minute. But because I've got a Labrador who's now 11, and he started becoming very vocal in all sorts of different ways. Just kind of, I would say, in the last couple of years, really. He does a lot of different types of barking. He makes little whiny noises sometimes when he wants attention. You know, they definitely change over the years, don't they?
Oh, they do. I mean, and the one thing that I do think is really quite. I mean, when we got the dog, we expected him to be, you know, like a walking compost heap, eating everything, and we got him during lockdown, so we bought him for, you know, to be a passport to get out in fresh air. But what's really been quite surprising, actually, is that above all everything else, you know, he's become a kind of peacemaker, and so we can't actually argue in the house because it upsets him so much. And you know, he's got this kind of, every time we start to raise our voices, you know, he puts his metaphorical blue helmet on and starts to intervene to try to sort of ease the tension.
Yes, it's a remarkable thing. Well, let's have a listen to one of the clips.
I'm so lucky that I'm a dog. I have no filters, while you humans are terrified of making a careless remark and being labelled racist or phobic and being cancelled. I've got a big bone to pick with the sanctimonious crusaders doing the cancelling. Why are they so sloppy with their language, especially when they're so swift to condemn people and eviscerate careers and livelihoods, sometimes because of a single word? Do they know what a phobia really is? Phobia comes from the Greek and means having irrational fear. Just in case that isn't clear enough, let me give you a few synonyms for irrational. Unreasonable, illogical, groundless, baseless, unfounded, unjustifiable, unsound, absurd, ridiculous, stupid. Need I go on? When I go for...
So, he's got a very interesting life, I guess, the dog. What's the dog's name?
Well, in the book, it's Björn, and it's because his owner in the book is a Dane called Daisy. There's absolutely no, any sort of relation to my Danish wife, Trina Villeman. Just as the main character in the book, Bacon Man, who's a former fat war correspondent, who's eating himself into Earl Grey, has absolutely nothing to do with me.
No.
But the dog has a fairly... I mean, he lives by the River Thames in a kind of uptight sort of community. And what he does, I mean, he's kind of frustrated because he can't actually sort of talk. And he wishes that he could pass on some of the information that the neighbours are sort of talking about, when they're sort of condemning Bacon Man and Daisy in the book, because dogs have got this sort of super hearing. And he hears all these, remarks that people make about Daisy and Bacon Man. For example, one of the women walking her dog walks past the house and whispers in a way that the humans would never hear, but the dog hears. The woman sort of complaining about Bacon Man, condemning Bacon Man, saying that, no wonder his wife is looking for an affair. It must be like having sex with a space hopper. It's that kind of thing,
Yes. Yeah, I mean, they have got a lot of secrets as well, haven't they? Because they see things that you didn't know that they saw, or vice versa.
Yeah, they do. I mean, if only dogs could talk. I mean, one of the kind of dramas in the book, actually, is where there's this really kind of dramatic sex scene, which the dog sort of witnesses through the door. And I mean, it's the sort of thing you can't really unsee. So, I mean, I'm not going to describe it.
No, please don't.
Because we're not, past the 9:30 watershed yet. But he's got a pretty sort of graphic mind.
Right. And because we played a clip from it, is it an audio book, I presume, as well as a regular book?
No, not yet. I mean, I haven't got around to sort of doing it yet, to be honest, but it's available as an ebook, hardback, only on Amazon, unfortunately. The infuriating thing is that despite the fact that somebody like Ken Bruce thinks that it's a work of genius, the publishing industry didn't. So I'm going down that self-publishing route.
I mean, it's not easy out there getting a book published. I mean, unless you've got sort of, a television show or, something like 1 million followers on Twitter, they're not really interested, are they?
No, it's a bit tough. I mean, I have been a proper author before. This is the follow-up to a book that was an international bestseller. I wrote a book called The Daughter of Auschwitz, which is the story of Tova Friedman, one of the youngest sort of survivors of the death camp. Yes. I have to say that maybe that's the problem, in that I jumped genres, in that an international bestseller about the Holocaust is not, the obvious follow-up is not a story about obesity narrated by a dog.
No, quite. Well, listen, I wish you well with it. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Take it easy. Malcolm Bradman, the book is called Dogsplaining, and you can get it on Amazon. There we are. And let's have a voice note from Wayne.
Good morning, Mike. Wayne from Essex. No wonder he treats this place like a dump, because we're told to treat it like a dump. Look at the civil service. Look at the guys in charge. I mean, ultimately, all we're told is Britain is bad, Britain is racist, the police are racist, the fire service are racist. You can't be a fighter pilot unless you're an ethnic minority. I mean, why have any respect for a country when the country doesn't have respect for itself? We're teaching children to hate our history, to not be proud. The latest study showing they wouldn't even go to war for us in the under-21s. I mean, I love my country. Granted, it's not the country I want, but you've still got to love it. At the end of the day, if you have a house and you walk into it and it's pristine, you're going to take your shoes off. If you walk into a house with dog excrement and fag butts all over the floor, well, let's be honest, you not want to get dirty socks, so you're going to keep your shoes on. It's really simple, Mike, really simple. Start at the top, implore respect, implore pride, and the rest will take care of itself. Great show, mate.
Wayne, it's a great point. And I was saying at the start of this show that, it's still a great country. There's still plenty of things to be very proud of about Britain. And it's important not to let those be forgotten. And important not to let them slip away. You've got to fight for things sometimes, and maybe that's what we should be doing more of. We shall see. I'm not basically charging you to fight people, by the way, in case anybody misinterprets that piece of information. Got Happy Spring from Zurich, from Neil. Thank you very much indeed. What difference will it make to the planet if the UK gets from 0.9% of global emissions to net zero, says Simon. This is utter madness and will bankrupt the country. And more of an explanation on the equinox front. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, you get equal hours of light and darkness. The solstices are the days of most and least light, says Stephen Beckenham. OK. Well, that hasn't shed any light on anything, as far as I can tell. Sharon is in Suffolk. Hello, Sharon.
Good morning, my darling. Lovely, lovely programme this morning.
Oh, thank you very much. What can I do for you today?
Well, it was... I was listening to your lady that was on earlier about... gender and sexuality.
Yes.
And it just crossed my mind to give you a little, maybe a chuckle,
Yeah,
but
go on.
also oh my God, this is where we've got to.
Okay.
My dog's just been licensed as a therapy animal,
Right.
a psychiatric therapy animal. On the form, it actually says handler's sex,
Right.
male or female.
Right.
Nothing else.
Okay.
On the animals registration,
Yeah.
it actually says this. I'm looking at it as I'm talking to you, so I get the exact wording. Animal sex assigned at birth, female, male. Then it's got a little star beside it, and if you go down to where the star is, it says sex assigned at birth refers to the label a veterinarian gives when the animal is born.
I mean, how do they even know there's a vet there? It's not like you go to pet maternity wards, do you? Quite often there isn't a vet when the dog's born.
No, but I mean, how ridiculous. This is the very reason people cannot take the LGBTAQ whatever
Right.
seriously.
I know. It's bonkers.
But honestly, that is exactly what it says on here.
Well, you know, I've got to ask you the question now, haven't I, Sharon?
What's that, my darling?
What gender does your dog identify as?
My dog identifies as a complete bloody idiot. Sorry, didn't mean to swear.
That's all right. That's fine. Very good.
He is a male.
Yeah, well, he would be, wouldn't he? Listen, Sharon, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Imagine that. What dog assigned at birth to a dog? I mean, do me a favour. This is Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 10 minutes to 10. We're nearly done for the day. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. We'll give you some more Morning Glory after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:52. I got this from Neil, who says, Mike, maybe Ange was visiting Ethiopia to visit that Spice Girl tribute band we ended up paying for. Ethiopia? That's how she says it. Tim says, Mike, can we ask if Ethiopia has a job for Raina, please? And another one here, Kevin in Southampton, has Raina changed jobs because I thought her job was to get houses built in this country, not spend time in Africa? Well, you might say that, mightn't you? I don't know what's going on. Let's get a voice note from Bob.
It's Bob here from Kings Lynn. Great show as usual. Just with regards to litter, many years ago, when I committed an offence, I had to do community service where I picked up litter from the sides of the roads, as did several other people, and it gave something back to the community, which is why it was called community service. It worked then, and it worked now with the right sort of governance. Thanks, Mike.
It's a good point. I mean, they keep talking about not sending people to prison, don't they? They say, it's better to give them something else to do. Well, maybe get them picking up litter. Here's the voice note from Jim.
Hi, Mike. It's Jim from County Down, litter picker extraordinaire. Easy solution for the litter problem, Mike. Bring in a deposit scheme. I've probably able to afford a holiday away in Spain every year with the amount of bottles and cans I pick up every week. Cheers, Mike. Bye.
Yeah, well, they tried that in Scotland, didn't they? And it was a disaster. I think that's the problem with that. I mean, it seemed to... I remember when I was a kid, they used to have a bottle return scheme, and it seemed to work, as far as I know. But I don't know, it didn't seem to work in Scotland. I don't know what they got wrong. Anyway, listen, we've had a great show today, as ever. Thanks to all of you who've been doing things for us and with us, sending voice notes, sending various other messages as well. And, of course, people really picking up on the Ethiopia stuff. Greg says this, Angela Rayner's dribble video sounds like a what I did at the weekend essay we had to write at junior school on a Monday. Ethiopia. But one of the most remarkable things about the show today was we had Dan Hodges on, as we often do on a Thursday, and he apparently has had some kind of road to Damascus conversion. It's because of all the times I've been talking to him. I think he's finally seen the light, and he's finally got some common sense. Have a listen to this.
If we have a chancellor who thinks the way you stimulate growth is to simultaneously load £40 billion of taxes on business, introduce a huge new framework of red tape and workplace regulation, to say to British businesses, you have to get to a point where you have zero emissions in net terms, and simultaneously start to slash public spending. If you think that is how to stimulate growth, it's not. You know, I don't go with this. It's not Rachel from accounts. It's Rachel from the madhouse.
Yeah.
It's Rachel from the loony bin. This is not going to work.
Right.
We are now reaching Liz Truss levels of economic illiteracy. Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, are basically, and Kemi Badenoch, are all collectively acting now as recruiting sergeants for Nigel Farage. I mean, if Nigel Farage had wanted to write a political script after the general election, it would be this. I mean, what is Nigel Farage and Reform's key message? They're all the same.
Yeah.
The two main parties, there is no difference between the two main parties. We've now got a Labour Party which is about to announce, we're told next week, announce a wave of austerity. I mean, so that will be the first thing, and then I think, frankly, Labour MPs and the Labour Party will panic, and at that point, and we were actually seeing it. I mean, you know, I think one of the things that's happened is the political narrative, as it does, has shifted, obviously, around Ukraine. What Keir Starmer's been, you know, Keir Starmer appearing, you know, statesman-like, etc. And a lot of people were saying, we had a Labour MP saying, this is his Falklands, it's going to completely transform his political fortunes. Now, I said consistently it wouldn't. I'm about to see
and
that.
It's all gone a bit quiet, hasn't it?
All that's gone quiet now. And then we are going to see, I think after the local elections, we are going to see a huge backlash within the Labour Party for the government's political direction. and very, very serious questions asked about Starmer and Rachel Reeves.
Yeah, and the panic will very much set in. Listen, it's very disturbing this morning. I mean, the sun's up, first day of spring. We're agreeing with each other. I've got this from Chris. He says, morning, Mike, what's happened to Dan Hodges? He's actually talking common sense.
Oh, well, my God.
I mean, for heaven's sake.
I've obviously pushed it too far.
You've obviously, you're going to get disowned yourself by the Labour Party if it carries on like this. I mean, when Dan Hodges starts to call Rachel Reeves Rachel from the madhouse, you know things have really taken a turn for the worst. Absolutely incredible stuff. But don't worry, because if they do decide to get rid of Keir Starmer, they'll just give the job to Angela Raina. Have a look at this.
It's great to visit Ethiopia's stock exchange and learn more about how it's unlocking Ethiopia's potential. We've got a strong relationship, which hopefully we will build on to deliver jobs for Ethiopia and the UK. It's incredibly important that the UK continues to work with Ethiopia because of our ties, and that we can do so much good together to improve the standards of living for both people here in the UK and Ethiopia.
Where's that again? Ethiopia? What's she doing in Ethiopia? What's the point? Well, I mean, she didn't announce anything at all. Sorry, Julie Hartley-Brewer's here.
Hello.
Sorry, I just talked to you because I see you there, and I just assume I don't have to introduce you.
I don't know about you, I think the most voters in this country, and just certainly our audience, a big concern I wake up with every day is, how are jobs doing in Ethiopia? It's a really big issue.
Yeah, and the stock exchange as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
You know, I think
they literally are just sending her places to get rid of her, aren't
Yeah,
they?
I think so. I think so, because she wasn't announcing anything.
Where should we